The rivermen have names for the drowned trees of the Mississippi. Every spring, the high water tears whole oaks and cottonwoods out of the banks, roots and all, and carries them south. And sooner or later, they take on water and sink. And where they come to rest, they wait. The ones that Bob and Sea saw in the current. The crews call sawyers. The ones that rise slow out of the water and sink back down again. Over and over. Like a man bowing his head at a prayer meeting. They call preachers. But there is a third kind. The tree that goes down whole and lodges deep in the riverbed. Angled upstream. Waiting in the dark water with no ripple. No shadow. No sign at all on the surface. A tree like that can stand hidden for years in the channel of the busiest river in America. And a steamboat running full speed at night can pass over 100 of them and never know it. And meet the 101st. The rivermen call that one a sleeper. Tonight, on the deck of a wooden steamboat carrying 200 souls down the Mississippi River in the year 1857, you are going to spread your blanket and sleep directly above them. Friends, tonight we ride the great river together, from St. Louis all the way down to New Orleans. The slow way, the steamboat way. If these journeys carry you off to sleep, a like or a subscribe truly helps me keep making them. And tell me in the comments where you are listening tonight. Now, lower the lights. The boat is waiting at the levee, and she leaves at dusk. It is 4 in the afternoon on a warm day in May, in the year 1857, and you are standing at the top of the St. Louis levee with everything you own in one leather trunk, looking down at more steamboats than you knew existed in the world. They lie along the riverfront for a solid mile, bow first against the sloping stone, packed side by side like horses at a long trough, and every one of them is breathing. Thin smoke stands up from 100 pairs of chimneys and leans downriver in the afternoon light. Their names are painted on the wheelhouses in letters taller than a man. Red and gold and black. Names like ladies and names like race horses. And their decks rise in white wooden layers. Story on story. Railed and carved and trimmed like wedding cakes that somehow learned to float. You have seen pictures of steamboats. Everyone in America has seen pictures. The pictures are wrong in one important way, and you understand it the moment you come down into the crowd. Nothing in the pictures moves. And here, everything moves. The levee itself is a market, a stockyard, a freight house, and a small riot, all happening at once on a cobblestone slope, the width of a wheat field. Drays and wagons grind up and down with their brakes squealing. Barrels of pork and whiskey and flour stand in ranks. Hogsheads of sugar sit sweating in the sun. And bales and boxes and crates of every size are stacked into streets and alleys of freight. And through those alleys pours every kind of person you have ever seen and a good many kinds you have not. Merchants in black coats, emigrant families, trailing children and feather beds, boatmen in red flannel shirts, a man selling oranges out of a basket. The first oranges of your entire life. Runners for the boats work the crowd, calling out departures like preachers calling sinners, and their voices tangle together over the noise. Memphis, One shouts, Memphis and all the way down, leaving this evening. Fast boat, sure boat, Vicksburg, calls another, Natchez, New Orleans, lowest fare on the levee. New Orleans. That word is why you are here. You are 22 years old, out of a mill town in Ohio, and folded flat in your coat pocket is a letter from your mother's brother, a commission merchant on Chupatula Street in New Orleans, offering you a clerk's stool and $8 a week and a start in the world. You have never been further from home than Cincinnati. Your father walked you to the landing there 4 days ago, shook your hand like a business partner, and told you to mind your money and write your mother. The packet boat brought you down the Ohio, and the Ohio poured you into the Mississippi, and the Mississippi has poured you out here, onto these cobblestones, into this noise. At the foot of these white wooden palaces, one of them is going to carry you 1,200 miles south. Choosing is easier than you feared, because the choosing is mostly done for you. Half the boats on the levee are bound upriver for Galena and St. Paul, and half the rest are local packets working the short trades. The runners hear the words New Orleans in your mouth and pass you down the line like a bucket at a fire. And that is how you come to be standing before a boat with her stage plank down and her furnaces already lit somewhere deep in her. A big sidewheel packet in the Orleans trade. 250 feet of her, white as a church, and layered like a cake. Her twin chimneys crowned with iron feathers, and a spread of gilded antlers mounted between them. High up, catching the sun, you will learn what the antlers mean before this voyage is over. Every boat that carries them has beaten another boat, somewhere, sometime, and is proud of it. The clerk's office is a little varnished room just aft of the stage plank, and the clerk himself is a young man with ink on his fingers and a ledger the size of a tombstone, and he takes your measure through the window in one glance. The trunk, the country coat, the careful way you hold your money. He is polite about it. He has seen 10,000 of you. Cabin passage to New Orleans, he says, is $12. That buys your berth, your meals at the cabin table, and the run of the boat, 5 or 6 days. Depending on the river, deck passage is $3. For that, you ride below, on the main deck, among the freight, and you feed yourself, and you find your own place to lie down. He says both prices in the same flat voice. No judgment in it, just the arithmetic of the river. And behind you in the line, a German family is already counting out coins into a handkerchief. And you know without looking that they are counting to $3 a head, not 12. You have $31 to start your whole life with, and you stand there a moment doing the sums every young man on this levee has done. And then you think of 6 days of river, and you think of your mother saying, "Eat proper," and you slide $12 across the worn sill of that window. The clerk writes your name in the tombstone ledger in a fast copperplate hand, and it is done. He slides you back a slip of paper and tells you supper is at 6, and the boat leaves at dusk, and you should mind your footing on the plank. You shoulder your trunk and walk down through the last of the freight, and the stage plank rises ahead of you. A broad gangway of white pine reaching from the cobblestones to the bow of the boat, with a rope rail on one side and a 40-foot drop to brown water on the other. Near enough, roustabouts come trotting down it empty and stagger up it loaded, an endless chain of them. Barrels on shoulders, boxes on heads, and you wait for a gap in the traffic, the way you would wait to cross behind a team of horses. And then you step on, and the plank moves. It is nothing. A spring, a give, a slow, easy rise and fall under your boots. The breathing of the river coming up through the wood. The boat and the water shifting together and carrying you with them. And your body notices it, the way a body notices the first cold of autumn, files it away, says to itself, well then, things float here. Nothing under you is going to hold still again for 6 days. You walk up the moving plank onto the bow of the steamboat, into the shadow of her decks, and somewhere below your feet, down in the dark of her, you can feel the furnaces burning already, a low warmth rising through the planking, like a stove in a farmhouse kitchen, banked and waiting for evening. A mud clerk finds you standing on the bow with your trunk on your shoulder, looking the way every first tripper looks, and takes pity on you. Mud clerk is the river's name for the junior clerk, the boy who checks freight on muddy landings in the middle of the night. And this one is maybe 17, all wrists and ledger, and he runs his finger down a page, finds your name, and says, Cabin Passage, this way, and starts up the stairs without once looking back to see if you can keep up with a trunk. You can, barely. The stairs are broad and white and curved like something out of a courthouse, and they deliver you one deck up into the long shade of a covered promenade, and the mud clerk walks you aft along a row of doors, dozens of doors, all alike, white-paneled, each with a little slatted blind, running away down the side of the boat in a line that seems to go on for a town block. Painted neat above each door is a name: Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Indiana. The mud clerk stops at one near the middle, swings it open, and hands you a key on a wooden tag. Ohio, says the paint over the door, and something in your chest gives a small, foolish jump. And the mud clerk sees it and almost smiles. Pure luck, he says, though folks generally take it for an omen if they want one. Staterooms all carry the names of states, he says. That is the custom on the western rivers. And that is the whole reason anybody anywhere calls a ship's bedroom a stateroom. He says it the way you would hand somebody a penny. A small thing given away 100 times a trip, and he tells you, supper is at 6 on the first bell. And he has gone down the passage with his ledger. Before you can thank him, you set your trunk down and take stock of the state of Ohio. It is 6 feet by 6 feet, or near enough. 2 berths, one above the other, built against the inner wall, each one just wider than your shoulders, with a straw mattress, a pillow, clean sheets, and a folded blanket, a washstand in the corner with a china bowl and pitcher, a small mirror, a row of pegs, one door, the one you came in by, opening onto the deck, and across from it a second door, slatted, that opens inward to the main cabin, So, the room is a little bridge between the outdoors and the inn. The walls are painted pine, thin as a cracker box, and high on the partition, a fretwork grill lets air pass through from the cabin, which means you will discover tonight that sound passes too. All of it, in both directions. Your father's barn had box stalls bigger than this, but the sheets are white, and the towel is clean, and the whole tiny room smells of paint and river water. And it is yours to New Orleans. The first room in your life you have ever had entirely to yourself. And you sit down on the lower berth in the state of Ohio and grin at the washstand like a fool for a while. Then you go looking for the washroom. And that is how you get lost. And getting lost is how you come to know the boat. You step through the inner door first and stop because you have walked into a hall out of a storybook. The main cabin runs down the center of the boat for 200 feet. A single straight room, longer than any church nave in your county, white as the inside of a shell, lit down its whole length by a row of skylights with colored glass in them. So the afternoon light falls in soft patches of red and gold on a carpet that goes on and on. Fluted columns march away in pairs. Carved scrollwork foams along the ceiling. And far off, at the end of the room, a mirror the height of a barn door doubles the whole thing over again. Columns and carpet and colored light. So the cabin looks half a mile long, and you appear in the far distance of it. A small, astonished man standing beside his own door. Waiters in white jackets are laying a table that runs nearly the length of the room, laying it for supper with real silver. And none of them pays you the least mind, and you back quietly out the way you came. The way you would back out of a church where a wedding was being set up. Wrong door. Clearly, you try the deck instead, and follow the promenade forward, and take the first stairway you find. And the stairway is narrow and uncarpeted and goes down, and this should have told you something. But down you go anyway, and you come out in another country. This is the main deck, the bottom layer of the cake, and there is nothing white about it. The ceiling sits low over your head, held up by iron-braced posts thick as trees, and the whole midships of it is a wall of freight, barrels and crates and rolled carpets of leaf tobacco, lashed and wedged solid, with alleys left through it barely wide enough for a loaded man. Forward, in the open, squats the machinery you have been feeling through your boots since you came aboard. A battery of iron boilers lying side by side like enormous black hogs, long as wagons, each with its furnace door glowing at the seams, and the heat rolls off them in a wall you can lean on. Firemen, stripped to the waist and shining, are pitching cordwood into the open doors, and the light of the fires leaps up their chests and faces, and the wood goes in with a boom and a rush of sparks, door after door, and nobody is hurrying, and nothing ever stops. Aft of the freight, you can hear livestock, a mule complaining somewhere back in the dark, chickens, the heavy shift and knock of penned cattle. Deck passengers are staking out their ground in the lanes between the cargo, the German family from the ticket line among them, spreading quilts in a slot between a tobacco stack and the guardrail. the mother hanging a shawl on a line to make a wall, the way women have made walls out of shawls since the world began. A roustabout comes through the alley at a trot with a barrel on his shoulder, and you flatten yourself against a crate to let him pass. And the man behind him, carrying nothing for the moment, catches your eye, reads you for a lost cabin passenger in one look, and points one thumb straight up at the ceiling without breaking stride or saying a word. Up. Washrooms are up. On the cabin deck. Forward of the wheelhouse. Everything for you, his thumb says, is up. You climb back into the daylight, and you find the washroom at last. And on the way back to the state of Ohio, you stop a moment at the forward rail and look down at the levee, at the freight still walking up the stage, plank on men's shoulders. Barrel after barrel, box after box, and below your feet you can feel the fires. And behind you, through 2 inches of painted pine, you can hear the silver going down on the long table. And you begin to understand what it is you have bought a ticket on. A hotel laid on top of a warehouse, laid on top of a furnace. All of it wood. All of it floating. And the whole arrangement pointed south. Waiting for dark, back in your stateroom, unpacking your razor and your other shirt. You hear the man in the next room through the cracker box wall, plain as if he stood beside you. He is whistling while he shaves. Some tune you half know, breaking off and starting over, easy as a man in his own kitchen. And you sit down on your berth to listen without meaning to. 1,200 miles. You think 6 days, and you have already been 3 separate places today that you will remember for the rest of your life. And the boat has not yet moved a foot. Somewhere below, a bell rings twice. Unhurried. On the levee, the runners are still calling. Memphis, Vicksburg, New Orleans. But the sound is thinner now. Further off, the sound of a town you are already leaving. Supper is at 6. They cast off at dusk. The change begins in the chimneys, and you happen to be watching when it comes. All afternoon, the smoke standing over the boat has been thin and gray, the smoke of banked fires keeping themselves warm. And then, a little before dusk, it thickens, gathers, and turns over into black, rolling up out of both chimneys in fat coils that lean away south, and pitch pine snaps somewhere down in the furnaces, and sparks fly up through the black like bees out of a burning hive. The firemen have been told to bring her up to steam along the levee. Here and there, other boats are doing the same, and the whole waterfront stands under a slow, dark forest of smoke columns, and the water between the hulls goes copper-colored in the late light. You have found yourself a place at the rail of the hurricane deck, the high open deck above the staterooms, where a crowd of cabin passengers has gathered the way people gather on any porch when something is finally about to happen. Below, on the levee, the last freight is coming aboard at a dead run. The roustabouts double timing up the plank, with the mate pacing the bow above them, and the mate has opinions, loud ones, about every man and every barrel, and the men grin at some of what he calls them, which tells you the cursing is at least half ceremony. Then the big bell rings. It hangs forward on the hurricane deck, close enough that you feel it in your back teeth. A bell the size of a wash kettle, and a deckhand swings it in long, full strokes that roll out over the levee and up into the streets of the town. and everything that was hurrying hurries more. Last passengers come skidding down the cobbles with carpet bags. A woman is handed up the plank between two boys who have each clearly been promised a licking if they drop her. The runners along the shore change their cry to leaving now. Leaving now. And somewhere below a hatch slams, and the plank crew stands ready at the big spars. And then the whistle. You have been hearing steamboat whistles all day, up and down the water, far and near, and you thought you knew what they were. You did not know what they were. This one is directly over your head, and it opens up with a blast of steam you feel through the soles of your boots. A deep two-note bawl that fills the whole river valley wall to wall. Hulls, bents, and dies away in echoes off the warehouse fronts. And every man on the hurricane deck, including you, has his shoulders up around his ears. And a small boy near the bell bursts into tears, and his father picks him up laughing. Lines come off the snubbing posts. The stage plank swings up and inboard like a drawbridge. And under you, slow, enormous, the wheels begin to turn. You feel it before you see anything. A gathering in the deck planks, a lean, and then the levee starts to slide. The boat backs out into the stream stern first. The wheelhouses churning up brown foam along both sides, and for a moment, the whole city of St. Louis lies spread in front of you in the last of the light. The levee and its wall of steamboats, the warehouses, the courthouse dome catching the sun above the rooftops, church spires going pink, and then the pilot far above you rings his bells. The wheels stop, gather, and turn the other way, and the bow comes swinging south with the current helping it around, and the city begins to walk away upstream. Nobody talks much at the rail. Leaving looks different depending on the passenger. A pair of merchants glance at the city, then go back to their cigars. The woman who was handed up the plank watches until the courthouse dome is out of sight, and dabs her eyes once, and puts the handkerchief away with the air of closing a drawer. You watch it all go. The smoke, the spires, the tangle of masts and chimneys, and you find your hat is in your hands, though you could not say when you took it off. The river below the city runs wide and full and the color of creek water after a storm, and an old gentleman at the rail beside you, a thin man in a linen duster, who has the settled look of somebody who has done this run more times than he could count, sees you studying the water and offers you a fact about it, the way old men on porches will. All that mud is the Missouri, he says. She comes into this river, 15 miles above town, and for a good while the two of them run side by side in the one bed and refuse to mix, clear water and mud water sharing the channel like a bad marriage, until the big river finally wins the argument. What you are riding on now, he says, nodding down at it. Is the argument settled? He tells you the river is high this spring, snow water out of the mountains and rain out of the plains, a strong, full stage, and a boat runs fast on water like this. Then he says one thing more, half to himself, looking at the drift going by. A fence rail, a tangle of brush, the gray rootwad of some up-country tree riding low and patient as a crocodile. High water is good time, he says, but she brings her lumber with her, and he moves off down the rail toward the Texas, without explaining, and you file it away the way you filed the spring of the stage plank. One more small note. In a language you are only starting to learn, dusk settles into the river valley. The banks have already gone from town to country. Bluffs on the one hand, low wooded bottomland on the other. Farmhouse lights coming out yellow here and there, back from the water. A cabin boy moves along the promenade below you, lighting the deck lamps one by one. And the boat becomes a soft constellation of her own, sliding south between the dark shores. And now, with the running lights lit and the night coming down, you finally hear her settle into her voice. The voice she will keep for 6 days, and that you will keep somewhere in the back of your skull for the rest of your life. The wheels find their rhythm. An easy, deep, churning stroke on both sides of the boat, steady as a mill. Under that, from the tall pipes aft of the chimneys, the exhaust steam breathes out in time with the engines. A long, soft huff, and a pause, and a huff, patient as a plow horse, and, under everything, felt more than heard, the fine, ceaseless tremble of a wooden body being pushed through water by fire, chuff, and stroke, and tromble. That is the whole song. The shores go by dark and slow, and you stand at the rail, letting the song walk up through your boots. And you are still standing there when the first bell rings below, bright and busy, and a waiter's voice comes calling along the promenade deck. Gentlemen, supper is served. You learn your first lesson about steamboat eating in the doorway of the main cabin, and the lesson is, do not stand in the doorway. The crowd carries you in. The long table you watched the waiters lay this afternoon runs away down the cabin under the lamps. White cloth, ranked silver. Castor stands like little silver church steeples every few feet. And the whole thing is loaded end to end with serving dishes. Dozens of them, all uncovered at once by the waiters in one rehearsed motion, like a conjuring trick, and the passengers pour into the chairs on both sides with a scrape and rumble you can feel through the carpet. Somewhere aft, where the cabin crosses an invisible line and becomes the ladies' end, families and married couples settle in under a chandelier. You find a chair midway between a cotton buyer already reaching for the pickles and a man whose face you cannot see past the platter of fried chicken he is transferring to his plate. What is on that table, near as you can reckon in the time allowed, is the following: roast beef, boiled ham, fried chicken, a saddle of venison somebody shot on some bank of some river this week, cornbread and wheat bread, and biscuits in leaning stacks, spring potatoes, spring peas, greens boiled with bacon, hominy, pickles, preserves, butter and pats stamped with a steamboat, pitchers of milk and pitchers of river water, which is the color of tea with too much cream in it, and which everybody drinks without comment. So you do too. And it tastes of the whole state of Missouri. Down the table there is pie, visible already. 3 kinds, waiting behind the meats like the second act of a play. And the whole company falls on all of it at once, at speed, in something close to silence. Nobody warned you about the speed. Around you, 200 forks are moving like a field of grasshoppers. and men are eating with their elbows in and their heads down, reaching past each other with a muttered word, or no word at all. And the waiters run relays behind the chairs. And plates are cleared, and pie is landing before you have properly buttered your first biscuit. There is no rudeness in it. It is simply the custom of the country. Eating done, the way the boat runs. Full steam, fires hot, no landings. 15 minutes in, chairs are already pushing back. 20 minutes in, the table looks like a battlefield after the battle, and the waiters are carrying the wreckage away by the armload, and you are sitting nearly alone in the middle of 200 feet of tablecloth with half a plate of chicken in front of you, and your appetite barely warmed up, nearly alone. Across the table, and one chair down, a man is watching you with open and friendly amusement, leaning back in his chair, picking his teeth behind his hand. He is 35 or 40, in a good brown sack coat with the nap worn shiny at the elbows, a satin vest with a horseshoe pin in it, and the kind of face that settles naturally into the shape of a man about to tell you something. On the floor, beside his chair, sits a squat leather case, hard-sided, double-strapped, the corners scuffed white with handling. First trip on the river, he says. It is not a question, and he does not wait for an answer. He nods at your plate. You eat like a man who thinks supper is going somewhere. On this boat, friend, supper is a horse race, and the horses are gone. He says it kindly, and reaches across the wreckage to the nearest pie, cuts 2 slices, and hands you one across the table on a clean plate, as if you had been introduced in church. Dried apple, he says. The cook does a fair dried apple. The peach is better, but the peach did not survive the first sitting, and it never does. His name, he tells you, does not matter half as much as his line, which is hardware, builder's hardware, shelf goods, locks, hinges, wood screws, coffin trim, out of a house in Cincinnati. And that case at his feet is full of samples, and his territory is every town with a landing between Cairo and the Gulf. A drummer, he says, in case you want the word for it. As in, drums up trade, twice a year down and twice a year up, spring and fall. This boat, or one just like her, 9 seasons running, and he says that with a certain quiet pride, the way your father might say how long he has worked, the same 80 acres, you tell him what there is to tell about yourself. Ohio, the mill town, the uncle in New Orleans, the clerk's stool waiting on Chupatula Street, and he listens with his head tipped, actually listen, and pronounces it a sound start. Commission business teaches a man everything. He says, what things cost, what men are worth, and how much of each is talk. Then, since you are the last 2 at the table, and the waiters are working down toward you like weather, he gives you, free of charge, between bites of pie, a first tripper's education in the vessel you are riding. Item, he says, the best sleeping on this boat is not the biggest stateroom. It is the one furthest from the wheels. And you cannot have it, because I have it. Item, the kitchen bakes for tomorrow in the middle of the night, and a civil man who happens to be awake and standing by the galley door around 2 in the morning has never, in my experience, been refused a hot roll. Item: the coolest seat on the whole boat of an afternoon is the forward end of the boiler deck, port side, going down, in the shade of the wheelhouse. And the reason you will find me in it is that I told you about it second. And item, he says. And here he leans forward a little, and his voice comes down out of its performing register into something plainer. You will see card playing in this cabin tonight. And most nights, and most of it, is honest foolishness. Drovers and clerks losing their pocket money to each other. But somewhere, on every boat this size, there is a gentleman working. You will know him, because he is the best-dressed man aboard and the friendliest, and because he plays like he does not much care for cards, and loses small and cheerful for 2 days before anybody plays deep. He tapped the table once with 2 fingers. A man in a fine coat who wants to know you by name before Memphis. Wants something by Natchez. Do not lend him your name, and do not sit down with him. And if he asks you to only watch, watch from far off. There is no charge for this advice. I have watched it get expensive for nicer boys than you. The waiters reach you at last, apologetic as an incoming tide, and the 2 of you surrender the table and drift out the forward doors onto the dark promenade, where the running lamps are lit and the shore lights of some small town are sliding by away off on the Illinois side. The drummer stands a moment, looking at the night going past, working a toothpick, comfortable as a man in his own dooryard. Get your sleep. First tripper, he says. The first night in a stateroom is like the first night in a new marriage. Everything is strange. The walls are thin, and the other party snores. He taps his hat by way of good night and strolls off aft toward the stateroom you cannot have. And you stand alone at the rail a while, full of chicken and pie and advice, with the wheels churning steady below you and 1,200 miles of dark water out ahead. And from the lit windows of the cabin behind you comes the small bright clatter of the waiters clearing away, and the first sounds of a fiddle being tuned. You go to bed the way a man gets into a cold creek, all at once, to have it over with. Boots under the berth, quat on a peg, the lamp blown out, and you stretch out on the lower berth in the state of Ohio, with the sheet over you and the little slatted blind cracked to let the night in. And you lie there straight as a fence rail, wide awake, listening to your new house. The wheels come first. They are the biggest sound aboard and the easiest to learn. That deep double churning off both sides of the boat, bucket after bucket taking hold of the river and letting it go. Steady as a mill wheel and nearly as old a sound. Water falling on water, over and over, without one break in it. Behind the wheels, higher up, the escape pipes breathe, a long, soft huff, and a rest, and a huff, the boat exhaling over your roof once for every stroke of her engines. And once you have picked that sound out, you cannot lose it, and you do not want to. It is the sound of a very large animal sleeping very near you, and it should frighten you. And instead, it is the most companionable thing you have ever heard. Under both, in the boards themselves, in the berth frame, in your own back teeth. The trombo, the fine, steady shiver of the whole wooden creature working. Too small to see, too big to ignore, and your body lies in it and hums along whether you ask it to or not. That is the boat. Then there are the neighbors. The cracker box walls pass everything, faithful as a telegraph. The whistler from this afternoon is 2 doors up, and he winds down his day the way he wound it up. Some tune in pieces, trailing off, half finished into a yawn. You can hear the shape of. Directly next door, a man is already asleep and snoring in long, patient furrows, plowing the same field all night, turning at the end of each row with a snort. Somewhere aft, a baby fusses, briefly, and is walked, and quits. 2 rooms the other way. A low argument about money is being conducted almost entirely in whispers, which the wall passes along anyway. Hiss for hiss. Boots drop. 1. Then, after a thoughtful while, the other. A lamp chimney clinks. The fretwork grill over your door carries the last sounds of the cabin proper. The fiddle put away now. One final hand of cards breaking up. Chairs. A laugh. A boy going down the carpet, turning out lamps. And then the long room beyond your slatted door goes quiet. And it is just the boat again. Chuff and stroke and tremble, carrying 200 sleeping people, and you south through the dark at 10 miles an hour. You are nearly under when the whistle goes off. One short blast, directly overhead, and you come up off the berth like a fish, heart going like a hammer, and before you can decide whether the boat is sinking or burning, the bells start below, the engine bells. Quick, bright signals ringing down through the decks to the engineer, and the wheels change their stride. Slow, slower. You kneel up and put your eye to the blind. A landing is sliding up out of the dark. Not a town, a woodpile, a shed. 1 lantern on a post. A wagon standing in the trees, with its team asleep on their feet. And the boat comes in toward it, sweet and slow, wheels backing in a sudden white churn, and touches the bank as gentle as a hand laid on a shoulder. The stage plank goes down by torchlight. Freight walks ashore on men's backs. Not much of it. A few barrels, some boxes. A single passenger steps aboard carrying a carpet bag and a fowling piece, and stands blinking in the torchlight like a man who has been waiting on this dark bank half his life. Somebody hands a mail sack down to the wagon. The mate's voice comes up through the deck. Unhurried tonight, almost gentle, and the plank swings in, and the wheels take hold again, and the lantern on the post drops astern and is gone, and the whole visit has taken less time than you took getting into bed. You lie back down. The boat gathers her stride again. Chuff and stroke, and the country slides on by outside the blind. And you understand something now that you did not understand an hour ago. She does this all night, every night, while her 200 people sleep. She goes on, working the dark shore, town to woodpile to town, taking on mail and men and letting them off. The way a mother moves through a house after the children are down, quiet, endless, getting things done. You do not have to watch for anything. The watching is being done. Sleep comes for you in stages after that. The way it comes, on a long train of thought. And you are most of the way down when a sound reaches you that is not machinery and not neighbors. And your ears surface one last time to take it in. A voice, far forward, out on the night air. A man's voice, singing out one long line, unhurried, with a rise and a fall in it like a piece of a hymn. A pause, the length of a breath, then the same line again, or nearly, the words worn too smooth by distance to make out. It comes in through the blind with the mist. Twice more, 3 times, patient as a night bird, and it does not sound like an alarm, and nobody is running, and the wheels go steadily on, some piece of the river's business being spoken aloud to the dark, in a voice that has said it 10,000 times. You mean to wonder what it is. You fall asleep instead. Mid-wonder, with the boat breathing over you and the sound of the singing line folding itself into the first dream of the voyage. And all night long, whenever the boat slows and the bells ring somewhere under your sleep, some part of you hears it come and go, and lets it, and does not wake you. Morning arrives through the slats in stripes, and you wake with the taste of paint and river in your mouth and no earthly idea, for 3 full seconds, where you are. Then the wheels say where, and the light says when, and you are up and dressed with the speed of a man who suspects he has already missed something. You have missed nothing but coffee, and only barely. The cabin boy is working his way down the promenade with a tray, and cabin passengers are surfacing all along the row of doors, coats half on, taking cups in both hands and drifting to the rail by some common instinct, the way cattle face weather. The morning is cool yet, mist burning off the water in slow smokes. And the river, this reach, is running a mile wide, tavny and easy, wrinkling here and there over its own business, with Missouri on the one hand and Illinois on the other, both of them so green it looks like bragging. The shore goes by like a painting being slowly unrolled. Bottomland timber, cottonwood and sycamore, standing with their feet nearly in the water. A clearing, a corn patch, a cabin with a mud and stick chimney, a dog that runs the bank beside the boat, giving it the news for a quarter mile before turning back satisfied. A John boat with 2 boys in it, lifting a trot line hand over hand, and one of them raises a catfish the length of his arm and holds it up at you, at the whole boat, at creation, and the hurricane deck applauds, and the boy nearly capsizes bowing. Twice before breakfast you meet other boats. The first is a big upriver packet a mile off, and the pilots talk to each other in whistles. One long blast, answered by one long blast, passing on the larboard side, and the 2 boats swap their bow waves and their smoke and are past each other in a minute. Everybody at both rails, waving at strangers they will never see again, exactly as if it meant something, and somehow it does. The second is not a steamboat at all, but a flatboat, a great pine box of a thing the size of a corn crib, drifting deep-loaded down the easy water inside the bend. One man leaning on the steering oar, and a stovepipe smoking amidships. The old gentleman in the linen duster turns up at the rail beside you in time to nod at it. Kentucky flat, he says, loaded with corn or hogs or both. They build them upriver, float them down to Orleans on the current, sell the cargo, then break up the boat and sell it for lumber, and walk or steam home with the money. Slowest trade on the river, and one of the oldest. That man will be a month getting where you are going in 5 days. He says it without any scorn at all, the way you would speak of a good plain horse. Breakfast is the supper stampede, played over again with ham and eggs. And you hold your own better this time, having learned to reach, and it is while you are settling your second cup of coffee on the forward rail that the whistle hollers, the bells ring down below, and the boat sheers in toward the Missouri shore, where there is, as far as you can see, nothing at all. Then you find it. One warehouse of silvered log, one rooster strutting the top of a woodpile, one cottonwood with a lantern hung on a nail, not lit, a road coming down out of the timber to the water, and on the road, materializing out of the trees, the way people came out of nowhere to a wreck or a wedding at home. Folks, a wagon and team, 2 men on mules, a woman with a basket of eggs, children assembling themselves out of the underbrush in that way children have, and dogs. And by the time the stage plank touches the mud, there are 20 souls on that empty bank, and every one of them has business or is determined to look like it. What happens next takes 10 minutes, and you watch it the way you would watch a conjuring act, because it is one. The plank is down before the boat has fully stopped walking. Roustabouts go ashore at a run with barrels of salt and a crate of dry goods and a plow, an actual plow, bright in its factory paint, and a man at the foot of the plank signs for it in a ledger. A mud clerk holds against his own chest for a desk. Freight comes the other way, at the same time on the same plank. Traffic passing itself somehow. A few sacks of last year's corn. A coop of chickens handed up shoulder high and complaining every foot. The woman with the egg basket trades it to the cook's boy for coin at the foot of the plank. Eggs for the cabin table. And the mail goes ashore in a sack the size of a pillow and comes aboard in a sack the size of a cat. And a young man, in his good coat, says goodbye to his mother with the whole landing watching. And she straightens his collar with 2 fingers, once, and lets him go up the plank. And in the middle of all of it, down the plank, carried level and slow by 4 men who have taken their hats off in 90 degrees of sunshine, comes a long pine box. The crowd on the bank uncovers as it passes. The wagon backs down to meet it. Nobody stops working. The barrels still roll. The chickens still complain. But a kind of quiet happens inside the noise. A channel of it, just wide enough for the box and its 4 men to move through. And the woman by the wagon puts her hand flat on the pine lid. Once, the way you would touch a sleeping child to be sure of him. Somebody coming home the long way, says the drummer, who has appeared at your elbow with his coffee. And for once, he says nothing further. And the 2 of you stand with your hats off among the passengers until the wagon takes up its load and turns back into the timber. Then the mate hollers. The plank swings. The wheels dig in, and the landing peels away behind you. Warehouse, roaster, woodpile, road, folding back into the green like a page turned. 10 minutes, beginning to end. You watch the people walk back up into the trees with their barrels and their letters and their long pine box. The whole brief town dissolving back into countryside, and the drummer reads your face over the rim of his cup. amused. "That," he says, "is the river trade, friend. Not the cotton and not the fancy staterooms. That," he nods back at the vanishing bank. "50 landings between here and Orleans just like it. And this boat is the store, the post office, the depot, the newspaper, and the undertaker's wagon for every one of them. Folks on that bank do not say a boat is coming. They hear that whistle and they say the boat is coming. Then he drains his cup, sets it on the rail for the boy to find, and goes off to see about his samples. And you stay where you are a long while, watching the timber slide by, with the feel of the morning settling into you the way the coffee did. Warm and dark and good that evening, as the light goes long and gold across the water, and the first supper bell is still an hour off. You are leaning on the rail outside the state of Ohio, when a sound comes up through the deck boards under your boots, singing, men's voices, down on the main deck, somewhere forward by the fires, keeping time with something heavy. A deep, easy call and answer with the thump of work inside it. And you cannot make out one word, and you do not need to. It is the best music aboard, and it is not close. You stand there listening with your supper coat half buttoned, and you make up your mind about tonight. The cabin has its fiddle, and its card tables, and its 200 feet of carpet. But the boat has a downstairs, and after dark, you are going to go see it. You wait until full dark, and until the cabin behind you is well launched into its evening. And then you go down the narrow stairway you found by accident on the first afternoon. And this time, you go on purpose. The main deck at night is lit like a barn at chore time, which is to say hardly at all. A lantern swings on a hook by the engine room door. Another burns way forward by the fires, where the light is red and comes and goes with the furnace doors. Between those two fires of light lies the whole midships of the boat, the freight piled in its lashed walls and alleys, and in every slot and shelf and pocket of that cargo. People are going to bed. They are doing it the way people make camp, because that is what deck passage is. 6 days of camping on a wooden floor between a boiler and a mule pen. Families have staked their claims in the lanes between the tobacco and the barrels, marked out in quilts and rope-handled boxes. And supper is finishing up on the tops of trunks. Bread and cheese and cold bacon bought ashore, or messes of cornmeal cooked by arrangement at the galley stove for a coin. A man in a hat that has crossed at least one ocean before this river is smoking the shortest pipe you ever saw. One arm around a boy, asleep, sitting up. 2 old women in black shawls are saying something over their bread that has the shape of a blessing in a language you do not know. A young fellow with his boots for a pillow is already asleep, with his hat over his face and one hand resting on the handle of a spade that is wrapped in sacking. And you would bet the spade is the newest thing he owns, and that it is going somewhere west of here to dig a farm out of the prairie. You walk soft down the freight alley, the way you would walk down the aisle of a church that turned out to be occupied, and midway along it, you find the family from the ticket line. They have built themselves a room, 2 trunks for the one wall, a crate of hardware for the other, a shawl strung on a line between a lashing ring and a nail. And inside that harbor, on a quilt laid over straw, the father bought off a deckhand. 3 children are stowed side by side like spoons. and the smallest one is in her mother's lap, being sung down the last few feet into sleep. The song is German. The tune needs no translating. It is the one every mother owns. 4 notes, rocking back and forth like a cradle rail, and the mother sings it with her eyes, somewhere out past the guardrail, out on the dark water going by, and her wrist keeps the time without her. The father is sitting up against the trunks with a map of the western country folded to a worn square in his hand, not reading it, just holding it, the way another man might hold a watch. He nods at you. Careful. A nod that has learned to wait and see what a stranger in a good coat wants. You have nothing to want. You touch your hat, and something in that changes the arithmetic. And he moves 6 inches down the trunk, which in the country of the main deck is a chair being offered. You sit a while with the family in their harbor. Talk is short and made mostly of nouns. Wisconsin, the father says, tapping the map square. His brother, 4 years there already. Land, cows. He says the word cows with the particular respect of a man who has done his sums about cows many times in the dark. The mother finishes her song and looks at you, and looks at your coat, and asks with her eyebrows and a lift of her chin how it is up there. Above, in the palace where the lamps are, you do your best with your hands and a few words. Big room, long table, much food. She nods slowly, filing it, the way you filed the spring of the stage plank. Information about a country she is riding through and will not visit. There is no bitterness anywhere in it. There is a trunk fare and a cabin fare. And this family has 3 children and a spade and a brother in Wisconsin. And every dollar not spent on this deck is a cow. She would think you a fool for paying 12. You suspect? And looking at the sleeping row of spoon, their shoes lined up in a rank by the quilt edge, smallest to largest. You are not sure she is wrong. Around you, the deck settles itself for the night in its own language. A man makes a circuit of his own baggage, touching each piece once, and lies down in the middle of it like a dog turning 3 times. The mule complains, aft, on general principles, and quits. And you learn, sitting there, the arts of sleeping in this country, just by watching them practiced. You sleep with your head on what you cannot afford to lose. You sleep out of the walking lanes if you can. And if you cannot, you sleep tight against the freight and trust the deckhands to step over you, which they do, all night, at a trot, loaded, without ever once looking down, the way you would step over a sleeping hound in a doorway you had used all your life. You sleep to leeward of the ash, if you can pick your spot, because the chimneys sift a fine gray snow downwind when the fires are pushed. And you sleep in your boots on the nights the boat will land, because when freight comes aboard at 2 in the morning, it comes through where you are lying, and the mate's voice comes with it. The heat rolls out of the boiler space forward in a slow, steady wall. And in May, at night, on the water, it is not a curse at all. It is the stove. The whole camp gathers round. Closest in are the single men and the sitters up, a ring of them in the red wavering light, and one of them has a Jew's harp going soft, more thump than tune, and the light jumps and falls on all their faces with the opening of every furnace door. And past them, the firemen swing and stoop and pitch, and the wood booms into the iron, and none of it wakes a soul on that deck, because it is the sound of the boat going, and the boat going is the sound of Wisconsin getting nearer. And cows, you pick your way back up the freight alley, past the sleeping harbors, and stop at the foot of the stairs for one look back. The lantern light, the quilt walls, the shoes in their ranks, the red glow forward with its circle of faces, all of it swaying together, gently, with the working of the boat. Up in the state of Ohio, you undress in the dark and lie down on your paid-for mattress in your paid-for sheets. And the berth that was a joke against your father's barn on the first evening has changed size while you were below. It is enormous. It is a county. You lie in the middle of it, listening to the boat breathe. And next door, the snorer plows his patient field, turning at the row ends. And 2 doors up, the whistler sighs in his sleep. And 1 deck down, straight down, close enough that you could knock on the boards between. A woman is lying in a harbor of trunks with her children stowed beside her like spoons, gone to sleep to the same 4 notes as you. The drummer collects on his hospitality 2 nights later, in the best way. By extending it, you find out at supper that he knows the second engineer, in the way the drummer knows somebody useful on every boat and in every town on this river. Some old kindness, with interest still accruing. And after the table is cleared, he catches your eye and says, "Come below with me, first tripper, and bring nothing you mind getting cinders on. It is time you were introduced to the other half of your ticket. The watch changes at midnight," he says, "and midnight is when it is worth seeing." So near the middle of the night you follow him down, past the sleeping camps of the deck passengers, forward along the freight alley, into the heat and the light. The fire room of a working steamboat at midnight is a picture out of a preacher's warnings. And it is also, you will decide before you climb out of it, one of the most orderly places you have ever stood. The boilers lie side by side in their battery, filling the forward deck wall to wall. Iron flanks, radiating a heat that reaches out and takes hold of your face at 10 paces. Below them, the furnace doors stand in a row, and before the doors, in the red light, the fire crew works the last hour of their watch, stripped to the waist, shining like wet bronze, pitching 4-foot cordwood off the ranked piles into the flames. There's a rhythm to it you could set a clock by. 2 men passing wood hand to hand from the pile. 1 man at the door, swinging it in. The boom of the stick landing in the fire bed. The rake and slice of the iron bar leveling the coals. The door clanged to. The next door open. Down the line and back again. Over and over. And the sparks fly up the chimney flues with a sound like a long, steady tearing of cloth. No one hurries. That is the thing you did not expect. And it is the thing you cannot stop watching. It is haying time's speed. Harvest speed. The pace of men who will be doing this exact thing 4 hours from now and 4 days from now. Who spend their strength the way careful men spend money. A steady wage of it every minute, and no foolish fortunes thrown away. When one of them wants water, he drinks from a tin dipper in a butt by the wood ranks. Half a dipper. No more. and pours the second half over the back of his own neck without ceremony, and steps back into the rhythm on the beat. Like a dancer rejoining a reel, the drummer puts his mouth near your ear. Cabin fare pays for the paint and the pie. He says, "This is what makes her go." The second engineer receives you both in the engine room, aft of the boilers, where the light is yellower and the noise changes from fire noise to iron noise. The long push and sigh of the horizontal engines driving their piston rods out and home. The walking beam gear clanking somewhere in its guides. Everything moving in slow, enormous strokes. Everything shining with oil. He is a Scotchman of maybe 50, with forearms like a blacksmith and a face that has been shaved by lantern light for 30 years. And he shakes your hand with a hand that feels like it was quarried. And then he pays you no further mind at all, which you soon understand is not rudeness. It is the same as the pilot's dark window. His attention is spoken for. What he watches, all watch long. Every watch is two small pieces of glass and brass. He shows you them the way a farmer shows a stranger his spring, briefly, sideways, without stopping his rounds. A gauge with a needle in it that tells the pressure of the steam in the boilers, the push of the whole penned-up river of heat those men forward are feeding, and a column of glass with water standing in it that tells the height of the water inside the iron. And this one he taps with one knuckle, and the water in it trembles, and he looks at it the way you have seen men look at a sky in August, reading it, fire below, water within. He says, "Keep the water over the fire, and she is a tea kettle, and as safe." He does not say the other half of the sentence. He walks on to his oil cans, and the drummer murmurs the other half for him. Being a man constitutionally unable to leave a silence alone, "Let the water get low," he says, "and she is a different kind of kettle," which is why, friend, that Scotchman has not finished a cup of coffee hot in 30 years. You stand out of the way by the cylinder timbers and watch the watch change at midnight. There is no ceremony to it and no wasted word. The new fire crew comes forward, already stripped, out of the dark aft where they have been sleeping their 4 hours in bunks slung close to the machinery, and each man steps into the rhythm beside the man he is relieving, takes the swing of it, matches it, and the tired man simply steps back out of the line on the beat and walks aft, and the wood keeps flying, and the doors keep swinging, and the fires never notice the difference, and neither do the 200 sleepers upstairs. The engineer coming on duty and the engineer going off stand together at the gauges for 2 minutes, and what passes between them is maybe a dozen words. Pressure, water, the state of the fires, one remark about a bearing running warm, and then the Scotchman wipes his hands on a wad of waste, hangs the wad on a nail, and goes off to his bunk without one look back at the machinery, which tells you more about the man relieving him than any letter of reference could. Just before you climb back up out of the heat, the bells ring. The pilot, high above in the dark, 4 decks and a whole world away, wants something, and the wire pulls, and the little bell by the engineer's station speaks. 2 quick strokes, and the new engineer moves without seeming to hurry and lays his weight on the reversing gear, and the great pistons finish their stroke, hang a heartbeat, and take up a slower one. The whole boat changes her breathing around you, away forward, faint through the fire noise. You can just hear it. The voice from your first night, the singing line, out on the bow in the dark, telling the depth of the river to the man on the roof. Nobody down here can see the water. Nobody down here can see anything but fire and iron and each other. The bell speaks. The hand answers. The boat swings somewhere up in the night, and the wood goes on booming into the furnaces on the beat. All night. Every night. 1,200 miles. You climb the stairs with the drummer, and the cool river air comes down to meet you like a drink of water. And at the top, he claps you once on the shoulder and goes off to his bed. You go and stand a minute at the rail outside the state of Ohio first, hands on the wood, feeling the tremble come up through it. It has a face now, the tremble, several faces, shining, unhurried, spending their strength like careful money in a red room under your bed, so that the state of Ohio can rock you, and the snorer can plow his field, and the spoons can sleep in their row, and the whole white sleeping palace can go breathing down the dark river at 10 miles an hour. You get into your berth and pull up the sheet, and the huff of the escape pipes goes on over the roof, patient as ever. And it sounds different tonight, and will sound different from here on. The way a stranger's step on the stairs sounds different once you have finally been introduced. By the fourth evening you know the cabin's whole liturgy by heart, and it runs like this. Supper goes down in its 20-minute stampede, and the waiters clear the wreckage, and the long table is broken down into its parts and carried off, and the cabin turns itself from a dining hall into a parlor, the way a meeting house turns itself from preaching to supper on the grounds. Everybody lending a hand, and nobody in charge. The ladies' end, aft, gathers itself around the piano that is bolted to the floor there, and the doors of the little social hall are propped, and the swinging lamps come down the ceiling in a row of warm circles, and the boat's evening begins. You have learned the congregation by now, the way you would learn a new church. The cotton buyer from supper holds a standing seat at whist with 2 Memphis merchants and the old gentleman in the linen duster, and they play with the terrible seriousness of men who play for nothing at all. The young fellow with the fowling piece who came aboard at the woodpile landing turns out to have a sweet high tenor and no shyness about it whatever. A planter's wife from below Vicksburg presides at the piano, and a missionary bound for the Choctaw country sits every evening with the same 1 glass of claret, making it last, and files away everything he sees with bright, pleased eyes, storing up the river the way a man stores up a country he expects to describe in letters for years. And there is music every night, some, not a concert, nothing arranged, just what happens when 200 Americans are shut up in a wooden hall with a piano and a fiddle, and nowhere to be until morning. The fiddle belongs to one of the cabin waiters, and after the tables are cleared, his time is loosely his own, and he plays reels and hornpipes at the forward end for the men, quick and dry and wicked, and then drifts aft as the evening softens and trades tunes with the piano, and the whole cabin, without ever deciding to, settles from the quick tunes to the slow ones, the way a fire settles. Somebody calls for the tenor, and the tenor obliges. Home Sweet Home gets sung at some point every single night. And every single night It lands on the cabin like a frost, gently, on 200 people who are every one of them a long way from somewhere. And for a minute the cards pause, and the claret pauses. And then somebody coughs, and the fiddle rescues everybody with a jig. Forward, past an invisible line, as fixed as any state boundary. The card tables, live. Most of what happens at them, the drummer was right, is honest foolishness. Penny ante among clerks. Drovers playing 7-Up for the drinks. Noise and slapped pasteboard and laughter. Money moving in small circles and coming mostly home again. Like boys swapping the same 3 knives all summer. But at the second table from the bar, the gentleman is working. You know him now. Everybody knows him by sight. Which is, you have come to understand part of how the thing is done. Since a wolf that walks through town at noon every day stops looking like a wolf, he came aboard at St. Louis, same as you. He is the best dressed man on the boat. This evening, in a coat of fine gray cloth with a black velvet collar. Linen like new snow. A diamond in his shirt front announcing itself in the lamplight. And his manners are the softest thing aboard. Softer than the carpet. He remembers names. He remembers your name. From one exchange at the rail 2 days ago. And touches his hat to you when you pass. And calls you by it. And being remembered by him feels pleasant. Which you note the way you would note the warmth of a stove lid. Information about how stoves get touched. For 3 days. Exactly as the drummer foretold. He has played small and lost cheerfully. Folding early. Laughing at his own luck. Buying wine for winners. Tonight the game at his table is different. And the whole forward cabin knows it without one word being said. The circle of watchers stands a respectful step further back than usual. The stakes in the middle are not drink money. Across from the gentleman sits a planter's son out of Tennessee. 25, maybe, wearing his father's success, in the shape of a fine hat and a horse he has mentioned twice. And the boy is up, visibly up, gloriously up, and his neck is red with pleasure, and he has just begun to believe that he is having the best night of his life. And every soul watching over the age of 40 already knows the end of this story. And not one of them can say a thing, because the boy is grown, and the game is straight enough to look at. And this is the river. You are drifting toward that circle of watchers. No thought in your head but watching. When a hand closes on your elbow, friendly as a trap, and the drummer steers you off toward the bar with the smooth momentum of a man who has done this exact piece of navigation before. Buy you a cigar, he says, loud enough for the table to hear. First tripper, come settle an argument about Cincinnati. There is no argument about Cincinnati. There is a match. And 2 cigars. And the 2 of you at the far rail of the promenade with the night river sliding by. And the drummer smokes a while and watches the water. And then he tells you, quietly, in a voice with no performance left in it at all, about a young fellow he shared a stateroom with once, years back, on this same run. Nice boy. Louisville boy. Hemp, money. Going down to be married. He watched 2 nights, the drummer says. Just watched. Standing in that same circle you were fixing to stand in. And the 3rd night, the gentleman working that boat invited him to sit in, just a friendly hand. and being watched by the whole cabin. The boy was ashamed to say no. He held out his hand at the level of the rail, palm down, and turned it over. Once, slow, $400. And his watch, he says, in under 2 hours. Wedding money? He went ashore at Napoleon, Arkansas, in the middle of the night, rather than ride the rest of the way in the same cabin with his own foolishness. And what became of him after that, I never learned. And I have thought about him for 9 years. The drummer studies the coal of his cigar. Nobody cheated that boy, he says. That is the part worth keeping. Like as not, nobody will cheat the Tennessee rooster in yonder tonight. Not so a court could find it. A man like that does not need to cheat you. He needs you to sit down. The sitting down is the whole trick, and the cards just do the arithmetic. He straightens up off the rail and puts his performing voice back on like a coat, and grins. No, that tenor is fixing to sing something mournful. I can feel it coming through the deck, and I want a good seat for it. Late that night, in your berth, in the state of Ohio, with the boat breathing over you, you hear the game break up at last through the fretwork grill. Chairs pushed back, low voices, a laugh with nothing in it, and one set of footsteps going aft down the carpet slower than the others. A young man's boots, learning the oldest arithmetic on the river. And you lie in the dark and count in your head, without meaning to, the distance from your own elbow to that circle of lamplight. And it comes out to about the length of a drummer's arm. The whistle wakes you. Year. One short note, and you surface just far enough to know the wheels are slowing, and some new hand you have grown inside yourself. These 4 nights, says Landing, small one, go back down, and you are nearly under again when the light comes through the blind, orange light. Moving, you kneel up and put your eye to the slats, and there, on the Arkansas shore, sliding nearer, is a sight worth every hour of sleep. It is about to cost you a wood yard, burning its torches in the middle of the wilderness, a clearing hacked out of the cottonwood bottom, one cabin with a lit window, and cordwood, ranked and waiting, wall after wall after wall of it. 4 feet long and split and stacked head high, and running back from the bank in rows like the streets of a small wooden town. And along the water's edge, a line of iron baskets up on poles, each one full of burning pine knots, laying a shivering copper road out across the Black River to meet the boat. The boat takes the road, bells below, the wheels backing, that long, sweet, sideways sigh as she comes in against the bank, and the stage plank swings and drops onto the mud with a boom that travels the whole hull. You are already dressing. Some things a man can sleep through when he is 4 nights educated, and some things a man gets up for. And a wood yard burning in the middle of nowhere at midnight is the second kind. Out on the boiler deck, the night is warm and completely awake. Every torch basket doubles itself in the river. Fire above and fire below. And between the 2 fires, the work is already moving. The off watch has been turned out. Deckhands and firemen both. And they go ashore, up the plank at a jog trot in a long single file. And each man passes the wood ranks and takes on his load. Sticks laid up across the shoulder and steadied with one crooked arm. 5 sticks? 6. More wood than you would care to carry across a barn lot, and comes back down the bank in the torchlight at the same jog trot. One endless, revolving chain of men. Up the shore, empty. Down the plank, loaded, the plank springing under each one in turn like a fiddle string. And they sing it. Of course, they sing it. You know that much about this boat by now. A leader somewhere in the chain calls a line. Short, riding exactly on the rhythm of the jogging step. And the whole chain answers him. A deep two-note phrase with the thud of 40 sets of boots inside it. And the wood booms down onto the growing pile on the foredeck on the answer. Every time. Boom. Like a drum, keeping the whole night in step. Call and answer. And boom. Call and answer. And boom. The song walks the wood aboard. You could not say whether the men are singing to the work or the work is drumming for the song. And standing at the rail in your shirt sleeves, you understand that there is no difference, that this is what the singing is for. The way the sea chants were for the capstan. Muscle and music braided together so that neither one has to do the whole job alone. The wood yard man stands at the foot of his ranks with a lantern and a tally stick, notching the cords as they walk away aboard, and the mud clerk stands across from him with the ledger. And midway through the loading, the captain himself strolls down the plank, shakes the woodyard man's hand, pays him in coin out of a canvas bag, and stands a minute in the torchlight passing the time of night. Two men doing business at the edge of a wilderness at 1 in the morning, as easy as neighbors at a line fence. Behind them, the cabin window of the woodyard house glows steady, and a woman's shape crosses it once, carrying a child on her hip. And you think about that, living out here, the two of them, and the trees and the river, selling fire to the boats. The drummer told you once that a good yard on a busy reach can burn through its whole stock every week of the season. Somebody is chopping, somewhere back in that dark timber, every daylight hour of their lives. Mosquitoes have found the torches, and the deck lamps, and you, and they are the first serious mosquitoes of the trip. Advance riders of the country you are getting down into, and the deckhands work inside a personal weather of them without any visible notice. You retreat a step further under the deck lamp and watch the pile on the foredeck grow, cord on cord, the boat drinking up her strength for tomorrow in great wooden swallows. And you do the small sum in your head. All of yesterday's fire is gone. The furnaces ate it. The wheels spent it. It is smoke somewhere over Missouri now. And this pile will be smoke over Mississippi by supper. And somewhere down this river tomorrow night, there is another clearing and another lantern and another set of torch baskets waiting. And that is how the thing is done, how the whole trade runs. Fire bought by the cord at midnight, all the way down to the sea. The last man comes down the plank with the last load, and the chain dissolves. Men peeling off toward the fire room, and the bunks, the song dropping away mid-phrase into ordinary night. Plank up, lines off, bells, and the wheels take hold, and the torch road swings slowly astern as the boat stands out into the dark. You stay at the rail and watch the woodyard go. The baskets burn on the empty bank a while, doubling themselves in the water, getting smaller, and then the timber folds in front of them, one tree at a time. And the last you see of the place is not the fires at all, but their glow on the underside of the smoke, a warm copper stain on the night, hanging over the trees, around a bend, and then the river straightens and takes even that. Behind you, the boat has already forgotten it. Wheels on their stride, escape pipes huffing, the new wood settling on the foredeck with small wooden ticks, like a hayloft fill that afternoon. You go back into the state of Ohio and lie down for the second time tonight. And sleep takes you before you are done pulling up the sheet. And what it takes you into is all torchlight and moving men, and the call and the answer and the boom, the whole midnight, walking straight on into your dreams without so much as breaking step. And in the morning, you will honestly have to work out, over coffee, how much of what you remember was the river, and how much was the dream, and you will get the sum wrong, and it will not matter. You wake before dawn on the fifth morning because the boat has stopped breathing. It takes you a moment, lying there in the gray dark, to work out what is wrong, because nothing is wrong. There is only something missing. And then your ears find the hole in the world. The wheels are still. The escape pipes are silent. The tremble is gone out of the boards. And the state of Ohio is not rocking. And under everything, where the deep working hum of her has lived since St. Louis, there is nothing at all. And the nothing is enormous. You are up and dressed and out the door in a minute flat, and the world has been stolen. Fog like wool, like milk, like the inside of a cloud, pressed up against the boat on every side, so thick that standing at the rail you cannot see the water below you, cannot see the wheelhouse aft, can barely see the next lamp down the promenade. A soft yellow smudge burning in a white room with no walls. The boat lies still in the middle of the river with her anchor down and her fires banked. And she is wrapped, muffled, packed away in cotton. And the river, you cannot see, slides past somewhere below with a small, secret chuckle at the waterline. The only sound left of it, an old deckhand is coiling line by the forward stairs, unhurried, and he reads the question in your face before you ask it, and answers it with all the drama of a man discussing oats. Pilot will not run in this, he says. Nobody will. Man cannot see the water. Man cannot read the water. She will burn off by 7. And we will lose 2 hours. And 2 hours is cheaper than a boat? He goes on coiling. Up on the roof somewhere, invisible, the big bell begins to toll. Slow, evenly spaced strokes, with a long breath between, and the deckhand tilts his head at it. So anybody running foolish in this soup knows we are here, he says. And then, from somewhere out in the white, faint and flattened by the fog, another bell answers. You stand at the rail a long time listening to that. 2 boats, blend, anchored somewhere on the same mile of drowned river, talking to each other in slow strokes of bronze. Here I am, patient as cattle in a dark barn. Passengers drift out along the promenade in 1s and 2s, coffee cups in hand. Nobody talking above a murmur, because there is something in a fog that makes a man lower his voice. The same something that lowers it in church. The whole white world drips. Every rail and rope and roof edge collects the fog and lets it go. Drop by drop. Tick, tick, all down the length of the boat. hundreds of small clocks running on water. And behind that, the two bells keep their conversation. Near stroke, far stroke. And you find you could stand here all morning. That this stillness is a kind of wealth. And yet you cannot get all the way easy in it. And it takes you a while at the rail to run the feeling down. 4 nights the boat has taught you her one law, which is that the sound of her working is the sound of everything being well. Wheels turning, pipes breathing, boards trembling. That is the boat saying, all is as it should be. Sleep on. Now the sound has stopped. And even though you know the reason, even though the reason is wisdom itself, and the anchor is down, and the bell is tolling, and everything is being done by men who have done it 100 times, some animal part of you stands at the rail, with its ears up, waiting for the world to start breathing again. She burns off, as promised. By 7. The sun comes through first as a pale coin you can look straight at, then as a warmth. Then all at once, the fog lets go of the trees on the Tennessee shore and hauls itself up off the water in rags. And the river reappears, mile wide, shining exactly where it was all along. Fires spread, steam up, anchor in, and when the wheels take their first stroke, you feel the whole boat give a little shudder like a horse let out of a stall. And you would swear the passengers along the rail all breathe out at the same time, and the 2 hours are paid, and nobody aboard calls it a bad bargain. By early afternoon there is a smoke on the horizon downriver that does not move like a boat's smoke, because it is a city's, and the Tennessee shore begins to gather itself. Clearings, then farms, then fine houses on the high ground, and then the 4th bluff stands up out of the river haze with Memphis on top of it, and the pilot reaches up and pulls the whistle cord. Coming into a great landing is a ceremony, and this boat performs it proudly. And as she rounds to, against the current with her colors flying, from up on the hurricane deck, a sound starts up that you have been told about but never heard. And there is nothing else like it on earth. The calliope, a keyboard of brass whistles run on boiler steam, and a man plays it with both hands. Actual tunes, at a volume that has no relation to music at all. Each note, a shriek of pure, jubilant steam that can be heard. The drummer swears. 3 miles back from the river. And what it plays as the boat swings in is a jig the size of a county, and every mule on the Memphis levee lays back its ears, and every child on the bluff top comes running, and you stand under that gorgeous outrage of noise, laughing without deciding to, and the whole city front comes down to see who has arrived, which is, you understand at last, entirely the point. The steam that pushed her 1,000 miles is now bragging about it. The Memphis levee is St. Louis, played again in a southern key. Cotton, this time, is the king of the cobblestone, last season's tail end, moving to the presses, bales stacked in bluffs of their own, and the drays grinding, and the runners crying their boats, and the smell is river and mule and baled, lint warming in the sun. The boat will lie here 3 hours working freight. Passengers pour ashore to stretch and gawk, and you and the drummer go up into the town together, and he walks you past the cotton offices on Front Row where fortunes change owners on a handshake, and buys you and ice at a confectioner's, and the ice is lemon, and it is a wonder. It is coming back down the bluff to the levee, in the last hour before departure, that you see the other cargo. They are gathered on the cobblestones down at the south end of the landing, apart from the freight, near a smaller sidewheel boat with her steam up. Perhaps 20 men and women, black, dressed plain but sound, standing in a loose double file in the sun. A white man with a ledger book stands at the head of the line talking to the boat's clerk, going down a page with his finger. And it is the ledger that makes your stomach understand before your head does. Because you have seen that exact motion a dozen times this week. At every landing, a man checking freight against a manifest. They are chained. You are close enough now to see it plain. Light chain, run wrist to wrist down the file, so that the whole line must move when any of it moves, and they stand quiet in the sun. And most look at nothing, at the middle distance, at the river, with their bundles at their feet, waiting with the terrible patience of people to whom waiting is the whole of what is offered. Near the end of the file, a young woman holds a girl of about 6 by the hand, the child's other fist knotted in her mother's skirt, and the child watches the crowd and the mules and the cotton bales with the wide, steady interest of any child on any levee anywhere, because she is 6, and the world is interesting, and her mother watches nothing at all. You have known this thing your whole life. Everyone in America knows it. It is in the newspapers and the sermons and the arguments in your father's mill yard, and knowing it, you now discover, is one thing, and standing 40 feet from it, on a public street in the ordinary sunshine, while men behind you argue freight rates, is another thing entirely. And there is nothing anywhere in your 22 years of Ohio for it to attach to. The clerk finishes his page. The line moves toward the boat's stage plank, all together, in step, because the chain leaves no other way, and the little girl goes up the plank on her mother's hand, looking back once at a dray horse she had been admiring, and they pass into the shadow of the boiler deck and are gone from the light down the river. The drummer says beside you, quietly, bound for the Orleans market, or a trader's yard in Natchez. He has been standing with you the whole time. You realize, and he is not performing now, and his face has gone still in a way you have not seen it. 9 seasons on this water, he says, and he does not finish the sentence, and does not start another one. The two of you stand there while the far boat takes in her plank, and then he turns and walks up the levee toward your own boat, and you follow, past the cotton and the mules and the beautiful afternoon going on in every direction. And neither of you says one word the whole way back aboard, and his silence, out of that man, is the loudest thing you have heard since the Calliope. Your boat leaves Memphis at golden evening, whistle rolling off the bluff, wheels taking hold, the city sliding up and away behind her smoke. And at supper, the cabin is loud with everything the passengers saw ashore, and you eat little and hear less. And afterward, you stand a long time at the after rail, watching the last of Memphis burn out on the northern horizon like a coal going gray, and the whistle of some boat far astern comes downriver on the Dusk, long and faint. And this is the fifth night, and it is the first time the sound of a steamboat whistle has reached you as a lonesome thing, and it will never entirely lose that edge again as long as you live. Deep in that same night, the whistle calls you up out of sleep once more. One short note, and the practiced animal in you says landing. Small one, sleep on, and has nearly won the argument when you hear the torches. You know the sound now, that faint, ragged flutter of pine knot flame in the night wind. And where there are torches at 2 a.m, there is something to see. And you have one day of this river left to you. And you get up. This time, you do not stop at the blind. You pull on boots and coat and step out onto the promenade, into a night gone soft and thick and southern, warmer at 2 a.m. than Ohio is at noon in May. And you look down over the rail into the middle of a harvest. The boat has put her bow against a plantation landing on the Mississippi shore. There is no town, no woodyard even, just a high clay bank with a road cut sloping down through it. A cotton shed at the top of the cut, with its doors standing wide. Torch baskets burning along the bank in a row. And above and behind it all, back on its rise under dark trees, one great white house with a single lamp lit in an upstairs window, keeping its distance from its own front gate. And down the road cut out of the shed comes the cotton. The bales come one at a time, each one rolled and steadied by 2 men. Down the sloping cut to the bank, where the road tips onto the stage plank, and the plank crews take them, and the bales walk aboard on a rolling thunder of their own weight. 500 pounds of packed lint apiece, bound in bagging and rope. Boom and rumble, boom and rumble. One every minute or so, steady as a pulse. And the deck crew below you catch each one at the foot of the plank and run it aft and swing it into place with hooks. Tier on tier, building along both guards of the main deck, a wall, arambar, a second hull made of cotton, and the boat leans and settles and leans as the weight walks into her, inch by inch, drinking her deeper into the river. The mate stands at the plank head with a lantern and calls the count, and his voice has gone to gravel days ago and stays there. 41, 42, and up at the shed door, a white overseer with a ledger keeps his own count against the mate's. And between the shed and the bank, in the wavering light of the torch row, the men who roll the bales work in the same shirt-sleeved rhythm as every crew you have watched on this river. Save that you know now, without asking anyone, that no wage is walking down that road cut with them, and that the lamp burning in the great house is not burning for their sake. You watch for a long time from the dark of the rail, and nobody looks up. The work has its sounds, and they carry beautifully over the water. The rumble of each bale on the planking, the mate's gravel count, the hook men below, calling the turns, easy, easy, come now, home. And from the men on the bank, between bales, in the waiting spaces of the work, a line of song now and then. Low, just a phrase, and its answer, pitched down where the work sits. Nothing like the wood chain's jog-trot music of 2 nights ago. Slower than that, older than that. A few notes traded back and forth in the dark, the way men bank a fire. And then the next bale takes the plank, and the thunder swallows it. The little girl from the Memphis levee crosses your mind, and stays in it, standing at her mother's skirt, looking at the dray horse. Somewhere south of you, on the Black River, this minute, aboard her own lit and working boat. By 3 the shed is empty, and the wall is built. The boat carries her cotton the way a wagon carries its hay, wider than herself. The bales tiered up the height of the boiler deck along both sides, so that the deck passengers, you realize, have had their whole camp rebuilt around them while they slept. Their alleys of freight become lanes between soft white cliffs, and tomorrow the children down there will wake up inside a fort and think themselves kings. The plank comes in, the torch row on the bank goes out basket by basket, some hand you cannot see capping each flame, and the landing pulls itself back into the dark, shed and road cut and clay bank, until only the one upstairs lamp in the great house is left, small and steady above the trees. And then the trees take that too. The wheels dig in. The boat swings her head out and down, heavier now, and you feel the difference through the rail under your hands, the way you would feel a change in a horse under saddle. Her stride the same, but the push of it deeper. The escape pipes leaning into their work with a longer, fuller breath. A laden sound, a sound with freight in it. The engineer on watch below has felt it too, and somewhere in the iron dark he has given her more steam, and she takes up her new weight and walks south with it. This is what she is for, you think, standing at the rail with the warm night going by. This is what all of it is for. When the pie and the fiddle music and the staterooms named for states are set aside, this is the trade underneath the trade. The fine boats run because the cotton must, and the cotton runs to Orleans, and at Orleans it runs to the sea, to Liverpool and Lowell, and looms on the far side of the world, and some part of the price of every yard of it, everywhere, forever, was paid tonight on that torchlit bank by men whose names are in nobody's ledger except as property. And you did not learn that tonight from any book or any sermon. You stood at a rail in the dark in your boots and watched it walk aboard the boat that is rocking you to sleep. You go back into the state of Ohio at last. Through the boards under your berth, faint, you can hear the new cargo working. 500 cotton bales settling and creaking against their ropes as the boat breathes. A sound like a hayloft, like a barn full of winter feed, homely and warm and terrible, and you lie awake in it a good while. 5 days, educated, 1 day from the sea. And when sleep finally does come for you, it comes the way the river fog came, slow and white and covering everything. And the last thing through your mind is the upstairs lamp in the great house, burning above the dark trees for nobody you will ever know. The drummer arranges it, of course, the way he arranges things, sideways, without ever seeming to ask anybody for anything. He knows the head clerk, and the head clerk knows the pilots. And somewhere between supper and full dark on the 6th evening, a word travels up through the boat on your behalf, and comes back down in the shape of the mud clerk, who finds you at the rail and says, if you want to see the top of the boat, tonight is a good river for it, and you are to go up after 10. And he gives you the rules on the way, counting them off with the gravity of a boy repeating scripture. You go up the after stairs. Quiet. You do not strike a light, not a match, not a cigar. You sit on the bench at the back of the house, and you do not talk to the pilot. And if the pilot talks, it will be to the river and not to you, and you are not to answer. No lamp anywhere near the glass. The mud clerk says, "Up there, light is the one thing that can hurt him." So a little after 10 you climb the last stairway on the boat, up past the Texas where the officers sleep, up into the wind, and let yourself into the pilot house the way you would let yourself into a sick room, and stand a moment inside the door while your eyes fail completely. The room is glass on all 4 sides, and black as the inside of a boot. Slowly it assembles itself. The great wheel first, taller than a man, its upper spokes standing against the faint gray of the forward windows. Then the pilot at the wheel, or rather pieces of him, a shoulder, the line of a hat brim, one hand riding a spoke, still as furniture. Then one deck below and forward, the twin chimneys against the stars, each one breathing its long roll of darker darkness across the sky. And then, last, the thing the room exists for, the river at night. From up here, it is not water at all. It is a broad band of dim silver laid down through a black country, brighter than the land on either side by just the width of one shade, wearing the stars on it in long, shaking threads. And it goes ahead of the boat, bend by bend, glimmering away into the dark like a road in a dream. And the boat swims down the middle of it with her running lamps hooded and her own windows dark, so that nothing anywhere makes light except the sky and the water's memory of the sky. You find the bench by feel and sit, and are still, and the room goes on about its work around you as if you had never come in. It is the quietest place on the whole boat, and it is the place everything obeys. That is what takes hold of you first, sitting there in the dark. 4 decks down, the furnace doors are swinging and booming, and 80 tons of machinery is turning the night into miles. And all of it, every fire and every man on watch, waits on this dark room and the small motions of one silent man. A spoke given, a spoke taken back. The wheel eased and steadied with the patience of somebody working a colt that only he can see. And he sees everything. That is the second thing that takes hold of you. And it keeps taking hold. Deeper, the longer you sit. Twice, in the first half hour, he alters the boat's whole course, for no reason your eyes can find, swinging her wide across the silver toward one black shore, and holding her there a long while before letting her drift back. Once he talks to the river about it, low, to himself, the way a man talks over a ledger. Bar, making down off that point since March, he says. Working out further every trip. She wants the other shore tonight. The wheel goes over, spoke by spoke, and far below the boat leans a degree in her stride and comes around. And you look at where he is not going and see nothing. Water, like all the other water, stars on it the same, and you understand that you are watching a man read a page on which, to you, nothing whatever is written. Later, a shape shows far ahead, a smudge of deeper black on the silver, and he reads that too. Aloud, unhurried, drift, he says, big tree, riding low, whole top still on her, and he walks the boat around it in one long, easy bend, and as it goes by to larboard, close, you can see it at last for what it is. A dead giant of a cottonwood traveling south, with its root wad standing up out of the water like an ugly head. Patient, silent, going the same place you are going, at its own pace. And the pilot watches it pass with the mild, professional interest of a man noting a neighbor's loose bull, and says nothing further, and lets the wheel come back. Toward the middle of the watch, the river narrows into a reach where the silver thins, and the pilot reaches up without hurry and pulls a bell cord, and far below the engines drop to half stride, and he leans to a speaking tube and says one word down it, and out on the bow, 4 decks down and 150 feet forward, a lantern uncovers, and a man swings a coil of line, and you hear it go out into the dark with a running hiss, and, a breath later, the small, far splash, and then the voice from your first night, from the fire room, from the edges of 5 nights of sleep, rising off the black water ahead of the boat, unhurried, carrying, half-sung, and this time, at last, at the top of the boat, with the man it is meant for standing beside you in the dark. You hear it whole, no bottom with this line. Then, the line hauled, dripping and cast again, the splash, the pause, and M-A-R-K, 4. The words stretched long and bent into that plain song rise and fall, so they will carry over wind and water and machinery, each sounding its own slow sentence. 4:4, half 3. M-A-R-K. 3. The boat feeling her way up the thin silver at half stride, while the man on the bow measures the river 1 cast at a time and sings the measurements aft. And the pilot takes each one and files it somewhere behind his still face, and gives or takes a spoke. Then the water begins to come back. Half 3 again. Mark 3. And deeper. And the reach opens out, and the leadsman's voice puts a kind of ease into the next call that you would swear was not there before. Quarter less Twain, and then, long and level and satisfied, the phrase you have been hearing through the boards of the state of Ohio since your first night on this river. M-A-R-K. Twain. The pilot takes his own deep spoke of the wheel and speaks to the river again, hardly louder than the wind around the glass. 12 foot, he says, 2 fathom on the line, Twain being 2, in the old tongue of this trade. Mark Twain is the first easy water, he says. A leadsman sings out Mark Twain, and every man on a boat that draws what we draw hears the same word in it. The word is enough. He eases the wheel a last spoke, and the boat comes back to her full stride under you, the escape pipes filling out their breath, and the lantern on the bow is covered, and the leadsman's voice does not come again, because it is not needed, and the silver road runs on ahead plain and wide. Enough. 5 nights that sound has been reaching down into your sleep, and your sleep took the meaning of it without ever once asking for the words. The way a child takes the meaning of a house's sounds long before he knows what a joist or a damper is. It was the river being measured all along. It was a man in the dark on the bow, telling the man in the dark on the roof, "There is water under us. There is water enough. Go on. You sit the rest of the watch without needing one thing more. And a little before midnight, you rise to go down, and remember the rules, and go quietly. And you have the door half open when the pilot speaks. Not to the river this time. High water tonight," he says. He has not turned around. The hat brim, the shoulder, the hand on the spoke. All exactly where the dark first assembled them. Good stage. Good speed. She brings a world of timber down out of the banks on a rise like this. Though most of it rides where a man can see it. A spoke of the wheel clicks. Softly, over and back. Sleep well, he says. This far south, the sixth night comes down on the river without any cool in it at all. The day was the hottest of the trip, the first true deep south heat you have ever stood in. And by full dark, the boat has soaked it up the way a brick wall does. Every plank and rail, giving the sun back slowly into the night. And the state of Ohio, which was a snug little box of a bedroom in the latitudes of St. Louis, has become by 10 o'clock a bake oven with a berth in it. You lie on top of the sheet in your shirt. Then out of the shirt, the pillow warms under your head like a loaf. And you turn it, and it warms again. The air will not move. What breeze the boat makes for herself slides along the outside of the blind and does not turn in at your door. And after an hour of lying there, being patient about it, you get up and prop the slatted door wide open on its hook, which is what half the cabin has already done. As you can hear, up and down the row, doors going on to hooks, one after another. The whole state-named neighborhood of the boat, opening itself to the night like a street of porches in August. The mosquitoes arrive within the quarter hour, singing. They come in ones, on patrol, each one announcing itself somewhere over your face with that thin climbing whine that stops, always, just when it is nearest. And the silence of a mosquito that has stopped singing is the loudest silence there is. You learn the war by stages. The same as every man up and down this row of doors is learning it, or has learned it, years ago. You learn that slapping in the dark is a fool's game that costs you sleep and gains you nothing. You learn to pull the sheet up in the heat you opened the door to escape, and trade sweat for blood at the going rate. You learn, finally, the oldest trick on the river, from hearing the man 2 doors down do it, which is to give up the fight entirely. Lee still, let the sheet go, and make yourself cheap. Somewhere after 11 you stop counting your losses, and the singing thins as the night's first bad heat lifts off the boards. And honor is roughly even, and the boat talks the whole time, with every door on its hook. The cracker box walls might as well not be there, and the night is one long, shared room 200 feet down the boat. And you lie in the middle of it and listen the way you would lie in a full farmhouse at threshing time. The snorer has company tonight, 3 fields being plowed in 3 different keys. A baby aft has a running argument with the heat and loses it slowly. Two men murmur over a last pipe somewhere forward. Just the bird edges of words. And a woman says clearly, out of some dream, the single word Thursday, in a tone of complete authority, and is answered by nobody. Boots pass on the promenade at intervals, the watch going about, unhurried, and under and around and through it all, steady as ever. The wheels, the huff of the pipes, the tremble in the boards, the boat breathing her way south with her whole sleeping family aboard, and the cotton wall creaking softly down below like a barn settling. Sparks pass the blind now and then, when the fires are fed, little brief orange travelers going aft in the dark, and once a fine sift of ash ticks across the roof over you, light as sleet on a shake roof, there and gone. On the main deck, that ash is falling on quilts and hat brims and the necks of sleeping children, and men roll over under it without waking. And it occurs to you, lying there slick and bitten and wide awake in your paid-for berth, that everything aboard this boat that makes sleeping hard tonight is falling harder on the people who paid $3 than on you. The heat closer down there among the freight, the ash thicker, the boots louder, the mosquitoes exactly as many, and that nobody down there is lying awake over it. Because a body that has walked from a ship at New York to a levee at St. Louis does its accounting differently, and spends its sleep where sleep is offered. Sometime after midnight, the boat rounds to at a landing, some nameless one, torches and the mate's gravel voice and the boom of the plank, freight rumbling aboard almost directly below you, near enough that the boards under your berth jump, and you lie there through all of it with your eyes shut, not asleep and not awake, and take a kind of census of yourself, and find that you do not mind. That is the strange gift the river has made you. 6 nights in, and you turn it over in the dark like a coin. The noise has stopped being noise. Every sound aboard has a name now, and a face, and a place. The wheels are the wheels. The boom below is cordwood for tomorrow's fires. The boots are the second mate whose rounds you could time an egg by. The gravel voice is the count being kept. The far, thin singing, when it comes, is the river being measured and found deep enough. And a body can sleep in any amount of sound once the sounds have all been introduced. It is only the strange noise that pricks a man upright in the dark. And nothing aboard is strange to you anymore. Somewhere in these 6 days, without asking your leave, this boat turned into a place you live. The plank comes up, the wheels take hold, the state of Ohio leans so gently back into her stride, and the pillow has gone cool at last on the turned side, and the mosquitoes have called it a night, and sleep starts coming for you in that slow tide you have gotten to know. Sounds arriving from further and further off, the boat's breathing, and your own breathing keeping company, and your last drifting thought is a small, proud, foolish one, that you have learned this river's whole nighttime language in 6 nights flat, that nothing this boat can say in the dark can surprise you now. You are asleep before you can finish being wrong. The 7th evening, somewhere below Vicksburg, the boat behind you announces herself as a light on the water where no light was. And for a while, nobody pays her any mind at all. You notice her first from the after rail, a spark away up the reach astern, trembling on the dusk like a low star. Boats have been in sight all day. This is the busiest water of the whole trip, and one more light astern is nothing. But this light does not fall behind the way the day's lights did. Through the first hour of the night, it holds its distance, and through the second hour it grows, slow as a plant, and by 9 there is no arguing with it. It is a big boat, coming down the same water you are coming down, and she is coming faster. The passengers find her the way a pasture finds a strange dog. One man looks, then 3, then a dozen, and by 9:30, the after rail of the boiler deck has a crowd on it. Cigars, all pointing the same direction like compass needles. And the talk starts. And the talk is exactly the talk of a county fair before a horse race. Somebody knows her by her chimneys, or claims to. Somebody else has ridden her, and gives her points on speed, but faults her table. A cotton buyer offers to make it interesting, and finds takers before the sentence is done, and money you would not see matched over cards all week comes out of vest pockets over the simple question of whether that spark back there gets bigger or smaller by midnight. Nobody has said the word race. Nobody needs to, and no word has come down from the top of the boat at all. But about 10 o'clock, you feel the answer arrive under your feet. The tremble in the deck boards deepens. Nothing showy. The stroke of the wheels stays even. But it fills the way a man's breathing fills when he steps off a porch and means to cover ground. And the huff of the escape pipes stretches a half note longer, and the smoke standing off the chimneys goes from gray to a fat rolling black that blots its own stars. And from the fire room, faint up through the decks, you can hear the pace of the wood quicken. Boom, and boom, and boom, the furnace doors swallowing faster. The drummer appears at your elbow at the rail, coffee in hand, reads the smoke, reads the deck under his boots, and grins like a boy let out of school. Pine knots, he says. Maybe a little resin besides. The captain is a deacon about his schedule and a heathen about his reputation, same as every master on this river. He will not race you. No, sir. He will simply decline to be passed. For 2 hours it is the best show on the Mississippi. The other boat closes to a half-mile and hangs there, the two of them pounding down the Black River in tandem through the sleeping country. And she is a beautiful thing to watch, come on. A tiered white blaze of windows and running lamps doubled in the water under her. Sparks streaming off her chimney tops like the tail of a comet, her wheels beating just out of time with yours. So the two rhythms cross and lap and cross again over the water between. When she closes another furlong, you can hear her bell speak now and then, and see the crowd on her own forward rails, black against her lights, watching you watch them. Somewhere aboard her, somebody has a horn, and sends a long, mocking note of it across the water, and your whole rail answers with a cheer and one flung hat. And the race is as official as it will ever get. She keeps coming. By midnight, she is close enough on your starboard quarter that her bow wave shows plain, a white bone in her teeth, and she is lapped up abreast of your wheelhouse. And here she hangs, The two boats, running door to door, down a long, straight reach with a quarter-mile of shivering river between them, and neither one gaining a plank's length. And the noise of 4 wheels and 4 engines fills the valley wall to wall. And it is glorious. There is no other word that will carry the load. You stand at the rail with your blood up like everybody else's, yelling nothing in particular across dark water at strangers, perfectly happy. And then you happen to look down and forward, and there is the mate. He is standing on the forecastle head all alone, out at the bow, where the leadsman stands in thin water, and he is the only man in sight on either boat who is not watching the other boat. He is watching the river, straight ahead, down the throat of the reach, at the black seam where the water meets the night, and he is standing very still, with his hands on the rail, and there is nothing in his shape of a man at a horse race. There is something in it of a farmer smelling the air in tornado weather, and the sight of him cools you faster than any word could. What happens next happens quietly. At the top of the boat, out of sight, the pilot rings down. You feel it before you understand it, the stroke easing under your feet. 1 notch, then another, the escape pipes letting their breath back down to that patient walking huff, and the boat comes off her pace so smoothly that the crowd at the rail goes on cheering a full half-minute before anybody notices there is nothing left to cheer. The other boat walks on by. She goes up your side in lights and thunder, wheel to bow in a minute, her people waving hats, her horn crowing long and jubilant, and she pulls out onto the dark ahead of you, and her stern lanterns dwindle down the reach, and the bets settle glumly along the rail behind you, and inside 10 minutes she is a spark again. Only now the spark is in front. The crowd thins fast after that, the way it does when the show is over, and you are nearly alone at the rail when the drummer, who has watched the whole retreat without one word, finishes his cold coffee and delivers the verdict of 9 seasons. "Old captains and bold captains," he says, "but no old bold captains. That fellow yonder is burning his margin to win a bar bet. Ours just kept his." He tips the dregs over the rail. "She beat us to Natchez," he says. "Now watch us pass her there at the bank, loading, while we go on by. The river keeps her own score. Friend, good night." He goes. The boat settles. The reach ahead lies empty and black. The far spark swings out of it, around a bend, and is gone. And the night comes back down over the water, the way quiet comes back into a schoolroom. And the wheels stroke on at their own sweet working pace. And the boards under your feet carry nothing now but the old faithful tremble. And you stand a last minute at the rail, thinking the evening is over. The evening is over. The night is not. You wake at 3 in the morning because the boat has stopped breathing. And this time there is no fog. That is the whole of what your body knows in the first second, and it knows it before your eyes are open. The wheels are still, the pipes are silent, the tremble is gone out of the berth frame, and the silence lies on the boat exactly the way it lay, that white morning above Memphis, except that morning came gray and slow through the blinds, and this is the middle of the night. And that morning the anchor went down with a rumble, and the big bell tolled its patient strokes. And now There is no rumble and no bell. There is nothing at all. Only the small secret chuckle of the river running on past a boat that has quit running with it. You are out of the berth and into boots before thought has any part of it. Up and down the row you can hear the doors. One hook slipped, then three, then a dozen, and low voices asking the night the same question in the same words. Why have we stopped? And outside on the promenade, the deck lamps are burning as always, and the night is warm and enormous, and the boat lies dead quiet in the middle of the black river, drifting, her head swinging slow to the current. And forward, out on the dark bow, a lantern is uncovered, and the line goes out with its running hiss, and the leadsman's voice rises, and one hearing of it tells you everything the fog morning never had to teach. The song is gone out of it. The calls come short and quick and stripped to the numbers. Quarter less Twain, and a breath, Mark Twain, and a breath, and then flat, half Twain, and the water is shoaling under the boat, cast by cast, in the dark, and the next call comes quicker still, and this time there is a lift at the end of it that is not music. Quarter Twain, the bells ring down below, sharp, 2 and 2, and the engines wake with a gasp, and the wheels bite, and they bite backward. The whole boat shudders down her length, timbers working, the cotton wall groaning against its ropes below like cattle leaning on a fence. And white water comes boiling forward past the guards from wheels, fighting the river's whole current. And the boat, 250 feet of her, heavy with cotton, checks and hangs on the water like a held breath. On the roof, boots cross the pilot house fast, once, and stop. Passengers are out along the promenade rail in nightshirts and bare feet. Nobody talking now. Everybody holding the rail and watching the black water ahead of the bow, as if looking could do anything. And the leadsman casts again into the churn and sings out scant Quarter Twain. And beside you at the rail, a man says, "Lo, to nobody. Sweet Lord, there is 9 foot of water out there, and she draws most of 8. And then you see it. Everyone sees it at once. The way a field of people sees lightning, off the larboard bow, 30 yards out, forte, in the dead silver sheen, the deck lamps lay on the river. The water folds. That is all it does. There is no log, no branch, no ugly root head riding the current the way the drift rode past the pilot house window 2 nights ago. There is only a place where the smooth running skin of the river gathers into a long-standing wrinkle. A seam, a pucker, the length of a wagon, holding still while all the water around it moves. The way a scar holds still on a moving arm. It would be nothing. On any morning of this trip, you would have looked straight at it and seen river. But the leadsman's lantern is swinging that way, and the bow is swinging away, spoke by spoke, and the whole dark boat is fighting backward from that one small fold in the water. And so you understand, standing at the rail, with your knuckles white on the wood, that you are looking at the top of a drowned tree, somewhere under that wrinkle, bedded in the bottom mud. Since some flood, nobody dated, a whole oak or cottonwood is standing up through 30 feet of black water with its broken point aimed upstream, aimed at hulls, holding stiller than anything else in the night. And the river is pouring over it smooth as skin over a knife. A sleeper. The word arrives in you on its own, in the rivermen's flat voice. And every hair on your arms stands up. What saves a boat is nothing you can watch. It is all invisible. It is all below and above. It is the leadsman casting and calling, and the pilot high in his dark glass room with the wheel hard over, walking her stern up against the current the way a man backs a skittish team off a bridge, and the engineer somewhere in his yellow iron light with his hand on the reversing bar, taking her orders faster than she can ring them. The boat comes back, and crabs sideways on the fighting wheels, and the fold in the water slides forward along her larboard side. Closer now, 20 feet off the guards, the wrinkles stretching and shivering in the lamp sheen, and the whole crowded promenade goes down the rail with it. Silent, in step, the way the eyes of a courtroom follow the foreman, and then the bells ring again, and the wheels stop dead, and in the sudden stillness the boat glides, just glides, on her own dying way, quiet as a sled after the hill, and the river speaks along the hull. It is not a blow. Nothing throws you from your feet. Nothing cracks. It is a touch, down low, forward, under the waterline on the larboard bow. A long, deliberate wooden groan that starts at the stem and walks aft under the deck you are standing on. Slow. The sound, traveling through your boot soles and up the rail into your hands. The sound of one enormous patient thing drawing its finger along one enormous hollow thing, from bow to midships, dying out somewhere under the cotton wool, and gone. The whole touch lasts maybe 4 seconds. There is not a sound aboard. While it happens, 200 people stand in their night clothes, listening to the bottom of their world, and the groan passes under all of them in turn, and fades, and the boat swims free. Half Twain, sings the leadsman, and there is the lift again at the end of the call, and this time it is music. Mark Twain. The wheels take hold. Forward now. Soft. A walking stroke. Quarter less 3. Mark 3. And then, long and easy. Half past everything. Deep 4. And the reach opens. And the pilot rings her up to half stride. And the beautiful ordinary tremble comes back into the rail under your hands, like feeling coming back into a leg. The carpenter is in the hold before the boat is properly underway. You learn afterward. Him and the mate and 2 men with lanterns, walking the length of her down among the cargo and the bilge smell, listening to the planking, laying their palms against the strakes the way a man checks a horse's leg for heat. She is dry. The sleeper drew its finger down 200 feet of good white oak and did not find one seam to open. By 4 in the morning, the word has gone around the boat in a murmur. Dry as a bone, not a cupful, and the promenade empties itself back through the stateroom doors by 2s and 3s. And the low talk runs out like a tide, and the doors click, and the boat carries her people on south exactly as she has carried them every night of the voyage, at her own pace, in her own voice, wheels and pipes and tremble, as if the river had never laid a finger on her. You are the last one at the rail. You stand there a long while in the warm dark, feeling the stroke of her come up through the wood. And off the stern, the river runs away, black and smooth and shining under the stars, keeping whatever else it keeps to itself. And it looks exactly like the river off the bow. Sleep is slow coming, and you let it be slow. You lie in the state of Ohio, with your hand flat on the planking of the berth frame, feeling her breathe. And somewhere below your palm, below the carpet and the carpenter's dry bilge, below the keel, the dark water is going by, full of its own business. Sawyers and preachers and sleepers, drift and bar and channel, the whole hidden country of it sliding along under the boat, 3 feet from the sole of a sleeping man's foot. And between that country and this one, there is 2 inches of oak and 1 man singing in the dark. And tonight, this night, that was enough. And the wheels turn, and the pipes breathe, and you sleep. By breakfast, the whole affair has shrunk to the size of a story, and everybody aboard owns a different one. That is the wonder of the morning table, and you sit in the middle of the stampede and listen to it happen. The man 3 chairs down had it from the mate himself. He says that there was never 10 feet of open water between the hull and the snag. The cotton buyer heard the pilot took her past, so close a man could have leaned off the guards and shaken its hand. A lady from the after cabin slept clean through it all, and is now suffering the particular grief of the traveler with nothing to tell, and being loaned pieces of everybody else's night out of charity. The carpenter's verdict, dry as a bone, not a cupful, is quoted up and down the table like scripture. And by the second round of coffee, the sleeper has grown a root wad the size of a corn crib, and the whole night has begun its long career of getting better with every telling. And you drink your coffee and let your own version keep still inside you. The fold in the water, the 4-second groan, your hand on the berth frame after, and you find you are not inclined to spend it at any table. Some coins a man keeps. The river this morning is running high and wide past the mouths of the Yazoo country, and before noon, the Walnut Hills stand up on the eastern shore, green bluffs higher than anything you have seen since the Missouri shore went flat days ago. And Vicksburg sits on top of them in the sun, courthouse and church steeples and terraced streets, looking down at its own busy landing the way a farmer looks down his lane. The boat works the landing for an hour. Cotton and passengers and mail, and you watch it all from the boiler deck rail with the seasoned calm of a man who has seen 50 landings, which you realize with some astonishment. Counting in your head, you very nearly have. It is late afternoon, with the shadows going long across the water, when the boat rounds a last bend and Natchez comes into view. And Natchez is 2 towns wearing one name, and no one has to tell you which is which. On top of the bluff, 200 feet up, the town proper takes the evening sun. White houses deep in trees, galleries and gardens, church spires, the whole crown of it rich and quiet, and looking out over the river to the flat Louisiana shore beyond, as if admiring its own good fortune. And at the foot of the bluff, crowded onto the narrow shelf between the cliff and the water, is the landing they call Natchez under the hill, a single steep street of boat stores and taverns and boarding houses coming down to the levee at an angle a wagon has to argue with. The drummer materializes at your elbow at the rail. Traveling case already in hand. Coat brushed. Hot set. And considers the place with the fondness of long acquaintance. Under the hill, he says, has been getting preached against for 50 years. And it has outlived every preacher yet. Sailors, boatmen, cards, fiddles, and sin. The whole bill of fare, and 40 steps straight up. He nods at the bluff. The finest cotton money on the river sits on its galleries, drinking punch and pretending under the hill is in another state. He says it without malice toward either altitude. A man giving a fair account of a country he has traded in a long time, and there, lying against the bank at the upper end of the landing, taking on cotton by torchlight already, is a boat you know. You know her by her chimneys before you can read her name. The very lady who walked past you in lights and thunder last midnight, tied up hard and fast now, with her stage down and the bales rumbling aboard, and half your boiler deck recognizes her in the same minute. And the laugh that runs down the rail is warm and entirely without mercy. The drummer does not laugh. He just looks at her, and then looks at you, and lets one eyebrow do the whole speech. The river keeps her own score. Your boat swings in past her stern, close enough to trade waves with her deck crew, and lands neatly below her. And you would swear the pilot laid her in that particular berth with a certain amount of pleasure. The drummer's leaving takes about a minute and a half, which you will understand only later is exactly how such men leave. He has freight to see to a shore, samples coming off, a consignment of shelf hardware for 2 stores up the hill, and a room he has slept in twice a year for 9 years, waiting for him under the hill. And he tells you all this while shaking your hand, one good dry shake, and the advice comes with it, free to the last. Mind your money on the levee at Orleans. It is the lightest fingered ground in America. Write your mother before you do anything else. A letter mailed the first day is worth 3, mailed the first month, and, he says, gripping the case, stepping back, if a well-dressed gentleman anywhere between here and the Gulf offers to teach you a card game, any gentleman, you go on and tell him you are a personal friend of the hardware trade, and watch his face fall. He touches his hat brim. Once, the same easy motion as that first night at the supper table, and says, "You will do." First tripper, and turns, and goes down the plank into the torchlight and the crowd takes him the way the river takes a dropped oar, that quick, that complete, and you never see him again in your life. You stand at the rail a while, with your hand still warm from his. The boat leaves Natchez in full dark, past the lamps of under the hill and the high scattered lights of the town above and below Natchez. That night and the next morning, the river becomes the thing the letters and the geography books promised. It is the lower coast now, the great sugar and cotton reach, and the wild shores gone. Both banks run in a continuous ribbon of plantation, cleared and levied and lamplit. The fields coming down to the river road, the road running along the levee crown, and the great houses standing back at the ends of their oak alleys, each with its lamps, so that the boat travels all evening between two low strings of light, like riding down the middle of an endless village, street a mile wide. The air is heavy and sweet and green, and the German family is at the main deck rail in the dusk. All 5 of them in a row, between the cotton bales, the father pointing out something on the shore to the boys, and the smallest girl, the one who was sung to sleep in the harbor of trunks a week and a world ago, has become, in 7 days, a complete river woman, and waves at every boat that passes, and every boat, this being the river, waves back. You keep your blinds open that last night, both doors hooked wide, heat or no heat, and lie in the state of Ohio, letting the whole of it come through. The wheels, the pipes, the lamplit shore sliding by, a dog barking its way along some levee for a quarter mile, a church bell somewhere far off over the fields, striking one, and you do not exactly sleep, and do not exactly stay awake, and you do not exactly try to do either. 6 days ago, you lay in this berth, stiff as a fence rail, learning the boat sounds one at a time like a man learning his letters. Tonight the whole alphabet runs through you without stopping, and you ride it the way the boat rides the river. And the last thing you are sure of is the leadsman, somewhere toward morning, far forward, singing the water, deep and easy, no hurry in it at all. Mark Twain, and you take the word at his word, and go down. The last morning of the voyage begins in the dark, and it begins crowded. You are up before 5. Some clock in you knowing the trip is nearly spent and refusing to waste the end of it on sleep. And when you come out onto the promenade, into the warm gray, the river has changed in the night. It has company, lights everywhere on the water, ahead, astern, crossing, boats running lamps by the dozen, where for 1,000 miles there were 2 or 3. Steamers standing down the same water as you and steamers standing up it. Ships' lanterns swinging at anchor in the stream, and along both shores the levee lamps burning in an unbroken string. And the smell of the air has changed too, sweetened and thickened. Wood smoke and sugar boiling somewhere, and the green breath of the swamps behind the plantations and under it all. Faint, for the first time in your inland life, something that is not river at all, a salt edge, an announcement that somewhere below all this dark water there is an end to the land entirely. The shores tighten as the light comes. The plantations crowd closer, then give way to market gardens, then to houses, then to streets of houses, and the river traffic thickens around the boat like a fair crowd funneling to a gate, and the pilot is on his bells constantly now, threading her down through it, and full dawn comes up, rose and gold over the eastern bank, just as the boat leans into the last great bend. And the drummer told you about this moment on the 2nd day of the voyage, and he was right. And being told does not spoil it at all. The river sweeps round in a vast crescent, and inside the curve of it lies New Orleans, and the whole city fronts the water at once. The levee runs along the crescent for 4 miles, and for 4 miles it is nothing but ships, ocean ships, deep-sea square riggers from Liverpool and Havre and Boston, lying tiered along the lower reach with their masts, making a winter forest against the morning sky. Yards crossed, house flags flying, more standing rigging in 1 mile than you had imagined existed on earth. Then the steamboats, your own tribe, ranged bow first against the upper levee, rank on rank, 100 of them and more, chimneys like a burned woods, and between and behind and among it all the levee itself, already boiling at 6 in the morning, cotton bales in ranges like fortifications, hogsheads of sugar, coffee out of the ocean ships, drays by the 100, and the sound of it comes out across the water to meet the boat. Wheels and chains and bells and men. The deep working hum of the greatest port between New York and the world's far side. The boat dresses for her arrival. Colors go up. The Calliope lets off one glorious jig into the morning as she stands down the crescent. Answering shrieks come from half a dozen landings, and the passengers line every rail in their shore clothes. Trunks packed and stacked, and the German family is at the bow of the main deck in a tight and scrubbed formation, the mother holding the smallest girl up to sea, and the whistle over your head lays its great two-note voice across the whole city front. And the city, being the city, does not so much as look up. The landing is St. Louis run backward. Bells, the wheels backing, the long, sweet, sideways sigh, the stage plank swinging out and down onto cobblestones, 1,100 miles from the cobblestones it left, and the boat comes to rest against the levee of New Orleans with a touch as soft as the first one, and stops, and something in the boards under your feet, some fine working tremble that has been in them and in you for 6 days and nights, runs down slowly, and settles, and is still. Going ashore takes an hour. The way of these things. Farewells at the head of every stairway. The cabin passengers shaking hands like the end of a long church supper. And you find, working your trunk down the crowded stairs, that a boat is a town you can be homesick for while you are still standing on it. At the foot of the plank, the levee receives you, and you walk out into it. The heat and the coffee smell and the shouting, threading between the cotton ranges with your trunk on your shoulder, and you have gone maybe 40 yards on the good firm cobblestones of your new city when the ground betrays you. It rolls. One long, slow, impossible swell passes under the pavement of New Orleans, under 100 solid feet of Louisiana, and your knees answer it before you can stop them. And you put out one hand against a cotton bale and stand there while the stone country finishes, pretending to be water. A stevedore going by with a coffee sack on his head sees the whole thing and laughs, not unkindly, and calls out that the ground will quit moving in a day or two. And a man that has just come down the river always walks like that, and it wears off. And you stand there, holding a stranger's cotton in the middle of the roaring levee, feeling the 6 days roll away under the street. And you laugh too, because there is nothing else to do with it, and because some part of you, some part you did not have 3 weeks ago in Ohio, is already sorry that it wears off. Before you go hunting Chupatula Street and your uncle and the whole rest of your life, you stop and set the trunk down and take one long last look at her. She lies at the levee in the full morning sun with her colors flying, white and gilded and enormous among her sisters. and she is not resting. The stage plank is thundering already. Freight is walking off her main deck on the shoulders of the crew. And freight for the return trip is stacking on the levee alongside, and a wood flat has come in against her. Forward quarter and cordwood is going aboard, stick by stick, for tomorrow's fires. High on the boiler deck, a chambermaid has the door of a stateroom propped open, airing the little room, stripping the berth to make it new. Some room with a state's name painted over the door. And at the head of the stage plank, the mud clerk stands with his tombstone ledger. And coming up the plank toward him, trunk on his shoulder, careful, on the spring of the wood, is a young man in a country coat, looking up at the tiers of white deck above him the way you would look at a courthouse. And behind him, on the levee, a family is counting fair money out of a handkerchief. And the runners are crying the upriver towns: Natchez, Memphis, St. Louis, and cabin passage is $12. And the river is running. She will load all day. You know that now, the way you know all her ways. She will load all day and take on her people toward evening. And somewhere around dusk, the smoke will thicken and roll black off her chimneys. And the big bell will swing. And the whistle will lay its voice across the water. And she will back out into the crescent and swing her head north against the current. And go. And tonight, in the state of Ohio, or the state of Kentucky, or whichever small painted room the ledger assigns him, that young man on the plank will lie down for the first time in his life on a moving bed, stiff as a fence rail, wide awake in the dark, listening, the wheels taking hold of the river and letting it go, the pipes breathing over the roof, patient as a plow horse, the fine tremble in the boards, and the boots of the watch. And somewhere far forward in the middle of the night, if the water thins, a voice rising off the black river, ahead of the bow, unhurried, half-sung, telling the darkness there is water under her. There is water enough. Go on, he will learn it all the way you learned it, one night at a time, and it will keep him the way it kept you. You shoulder your trunk and turn and walk up into the roar of the city. And behind you the boat goes on, drinking up her cordwood in the sunshine, getting ready for the dark. The record of the river says that a steamboat in those years lived, on the average, about 5 seasons. Snags took them, and bars held them for the ice, and fire loved them. All that dry painted pine, and now and then a boiler let go and took a whole sleeping town of a boat with it in one white instant. The men who built them knew those figures better than anybody, and built them anyway, finer every year, gilded and chandeliered and carpeted, palaces raised on hulls that might not see 4 birthdays. And the wonder is not that so many were lost. The wonder is how gladly the river country kept building them, as if everyone had agreed together that a short life was no reason a thing should not be beautiful. The boat that carried you was one of the lucky ones, well-handled, well-minded, dry in her hold at New Orleans. Most crossings of that water were exactly as lucky as yours. The rivermen knew the ones that were not, and named their boats and their bends after them, and went back on watch. And the sleeping palace was carried, every mile of it, on hands, The firemen spending their strength in the red light, by the cord and by the watch, the roustabouts walking freight up the springing plank at a jog trot. All night. At 50 landings, the chambermaids and the waiters and the cooks who fed 200 people at a 20-minute table 3 times a day, and below all of it, underneath the whole shining trade, the hands that made the cargo itself, the men and women on the torchlit bank who rolled the cotton down to the water and were never named in any ledger except as property, and the ones who went down the river in chains as freight beside it. The fine boats ran on that labor as surely as they ran on cordwood, and a true account of that river carries both the music and the price of the music, or it carries nothing. You could not know. Standing on the levee at New Orleans in the spring of 1857, that you had ridden the crest of the wave. Nobody aboard knew. But the railroads were already laying iron across the boat's country, a few miles further every month. And 4 years after your voyage, the war came, and the river closed like a door, and gunboats anchored where the packets had raced. When it was over, the trade came back, but the crown had passed, and the great days never fully returned, and the men who had lived them grew old telling about them, the way men do, so that the steamboat years turned to gold in the telling, while the telling was still going on, and one of the tellers had been there that very spring, a young cub pilot, 21 years old, was learning that same water, the season you rode it, standing his watches in dark pilot houses between St. Louis and New Orleans, taking the whole river into his memory bend by bend. And years later, far from the water, when he sat down to write and needed a name to sign, he took the one the leadsman had been singing into the dark all along, Mark Twain, Safe Water. It became the most famous name in American letters. And it was a depth call first. The leadsmen are long quiet now, and the wood yards have gone back to forest, and the last of the great packets is a century gone. But the thing you learned in 6 nights on that boat did not go anywhere. It is the oldest trade there is, older than the river towns, old as the first camp with a fire in it, that somebody stays awake so the rest can sleep. The pilot in his dark glass room, the engineer watching his water, the man on the bow singing the depth to the man on the roof, all of them holding the night open so that 200 people could lie down behind thin pine walls in the middle of a wilderness river and simply trust and be right to. So here is the last of it. Friend, the lamps are turned down. The doors are on their hook. Listen, and you can hear your own breath going, steady as escape pipes, patient as a plow horse, carrying you along at its own sweet working pace. The channel ahead is sounded, and the water is deep, and somebody reliable has the wheel. Mark Twain, the river says, water enough. Go on. Sleep now. You are across.